Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Siegfried Scholz, President of ESWET, the European Suppliers of Waste to Energy Technology, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this event called Waste to Energy and the City, Generating Value for Communities, which is co-hosted by the Committee of the Regions and ESWET. I would like to start off by expressing on behalf of ESWET our gratitude to the Committee of the Regions, in short COR, for hosting our conference and for supporting the entire organization of the event. And I would like to thank personally Mr. Andries Griffroy, the Vice President of the COR's Envy Commission, for assisting us in this process. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all the speakers and attendees, both online and here on site with us, and I hope that this conference will provide valuable insights and foster meaningful discussions on waste to energy and its multi-level role in supporting local communities in Europe. Without a doubt, we are currently living in an era where waste has, amongst others, become a major concern for many local communities and regions around the world, and of course also in Europe. The negative impacts of uncontrolled waste are evident, ranging from environmental degradation to public health issues. Waste management is thus a crucial process for ensuring the safe and efficient management of waste products, thus reducing the negative impact of waste on the environment and the climate. The waste management sector also presents an opportunity for economic growth, particularly through waste to energy technologies that can transform waste into a valuable resource. Waste to energy is the process of recovering materials and energy from residual, non-recyclable waste. This technology converts the waste into valuable resources such as electricity, heat, and potentially fuel, which can be used to power homes, businesses, and industries. It can also recover minerals and metals, even precious ones. Waste to energy technologies have significant potential to reduce the amount of waste that ends up in landfills, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and to provide economic benefits through job creation and supply of reliable energy. The use of waste to energy technologies has gained increased attention in the context of the European energy crisis. The crisis has been driven by a combination of factors, including the increasing demand for electricity, the rising cost of fossil fuels, and concerns over greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. As a result, there is a growing need for alternative resources of energy, and waste to energy has emerged as a promising solution. The use of waste to energy technologies can help to achieve a balance between circular economy and energy security. Waste to energy technologies can supply energy from waste materials and provide a reliable source of energy, complementary to intermittent renewable energy sources like wind and solar. This can help reduce our dependence on traditional energy sources and promote the use of renewable energy. Furthermore, many European countries have set ambitious targets to increase their use of renewable energy, and waste to energy can contribute to meeting these targets. Besides, more than 50% of the energy output of waste to energy plants in the EU is already renewable, as it is coming from biomass. While waste to energy has significant potential to contribute to addressing the European energy crisis, it should not be viewed as a standalone solution or panacea. Waste to energy should be part of a broader strategy that includes reducing waste generation, promoting recycling and reuse in line with waste management hierarchy and the circular economy, together with investing in other forms of renewable energy. This will help to achieve a more sustainable and resilient energy system that balances our economic, social, and environmental needs. That is why achieving a balance between circular economy and energy security is crucial for addressing both the environmental and economic challenges facing our societies. To ensure that citizens' views are taken into consideration by local authorities, it is important to promote transparency, accountability, and stakeholder engagement. Local authorities should engage citizens in the decision-making process, provide information about waste management and waste to energy initiatives, and solicit feedback from citizens. Overall, by involving citizens and community groups in the concept, design, construction, and operation of waste-to-energy facilities, local authorities can take into account citizens' needs and concerns and plan the facility in a way that minimizes potential negative impacts while maximizing benefits for the community. This can help to build trust and transparency and ensure that the facility is well received by the community and that it operates effectively and sustainably over the long term. Today's event features 3 panels, each focusing on different aspects of the topic. Our distinguished panelists will discuss the challenges faced by local communities in managing their waste, the latest technological innovations in waste to energy, the success stories of cities with waste to energy as a part of an integrated waste management, the decarbonization efforts of the waste to energy sector, the importance of safeguarding the circular economy while ensuring energy security, and how waste to energy projects consider citizens' inputs, as well as the economic and environmental benefits of waste to energy for local communities. We are indeed honored to have you with us today, policymakers and experts who have been actively addressing waste management issues and promoting sustainable practices. Through their insights and experiences, we hope to learn about the best practices and strategies that can help us move towards a cleaner, more sustainable future. I would like to take the opportunity of this opening speech and thank deeply on behalf of ESWET, Ella Stengler and Aurélie Beauvais for taking on the challenging role of moderating the first and third panel respectively. Dr. Ella Stengler is the Managing Director of CWEP, the Confederation of European Waste-to-Energy Plants, since July 2003. Before that, she was the Managing Director of the German Waste-to-Energy Association, ETAD, and previously she headed AGS, a public-private partnership organization dealing with hazardous waste and waste shipments. She studied law in Germany and France. Ella is dealing with European policy and legislation on waste, environment, energy, sustainability, pollution prevention, sustainable finance, etc. Current priorities are the European Green Deal, the circular economy, European energy and climate policies. Aurélie Beauvais is the Managing Director of Euroheat and Power, the European Association promoting sustainable district heating and cooling. She has over a decade of experience in political strategy, advocacy, and EU energy and climate policies. Aurélie previously held the position of Deputy CEO and Policy Director of Solar Power Europe from 2017 to 2021. She headed the European Affairs Department of the French Union of Electricity from 2012 to 17. Without further ado, let us begin with the first panel discussion. Ella, Eero, Kata, and Andries, I invite you to take the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scholz, for this kind introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in the room and also online. Well, there is no way to achieve the goals of the Green Deal without the regions, the cities, and the municipalities. Without their commitment, we won't get far in implementing what is decided here in Brussels. Therefore, we are here today in the premises of the European Committee of the Regions, and the organizer, ESWET, has chosen the venue very well in order to discuss how waste to energy can contribute to sustainable waste management, a clean circular economy, and energy security in the regions. Before we will hear the statements on this from the members of the Committee of the Regions, we will listen to the European Commission. What is their perspective on energy systems in European cities and municipalities? And I'm very happy to introduce Eero Ailio, I hope the pronunciation is not too bad, to give us an overview about the European Commission's view. He is advisor, energy transition and local governance at the Directorate General of Energy. And he advises senior management on energy transition, leads subnational and non-state actor cooperation inter alia, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, and the Cities Mission. As manager, he developed consumer concepts of the Clean Energy for All Europeans legislation negotiated offshore legislation and international agreements on satellite navigation. He has served as a career diplomat on, for instance, security and humanitarian aid, and worked in international finance, media, and city promotion. He has a Master of Science from Hanken Business University, Finland, was a Nordplus Scholar at Stockholm University, and alumnus of the US International Visitor Program. His nationality is Finnish. Eero, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It was such a perfect pronunciation of my name that I couldn't even recognize it. I'm not used to it. Thank you so much, Stella, and also Mr. Scholz there, yeah, for opening this. It's funny when you mentioned spoke about policymakers and experts, so I thought that I could put myself on one of those categories, but not both at the same time. It's a challenging thing, particularly in this area. Anyway, so I prepared some slides as requested. So perhaps we kick off with them. There we go. And I think here, these pie charts are energy mixes. So in the center is what in the European Union, which type of energies are used by the countries, from coal to oil, wind, solar, hydro, and all these things. And then the five other ones are giving examples of a few countries. So there's Germany on the left, and bottom left there's France, in the center down there's Sweden, and there's Greece and Spain on the right. Now, I forget the numbers, not important. If you just look at the colors, so you get one point through, which is that my job is impossible here to talk about energy systems in European municipalities, because I mean, even the countries are so diverse. So there's no such thing as a one or typical energy system. So that just to bring down the expectations, maybe. Let's go to the next one. Renewable energy was the other area I wanted to focus on, because the topic is otherwise too vast. So if we look at renewables, that's one of the key policies in the Green Deal. So we are standing today at the renewable share of a bit over 20%. That's good. It could be better, and it must be better. So we have to accelerate. These are not the very, let's say, freshest figures. So, but we see that electricity sector is the one which is leading in terms of the renewable share. Then heating and cooling, it's already better, but there's room to improve. And transport is the difficult case. And the blue picture there shows the different countries, how they are approaching this. So again, a lot of variability there. And I think the promising thing that we've seen here is that since a couple of years, so renewable energy is now the cheapest form of electricity. So that bodes well for the future if you compare it to coal or nuclear or so on. Next, please. Here you have an IEA slide. I stole this from Tim Golden IEA, and these guys make really nice slides. So here we are looking at basically 2010-2030. The 30 years is, of course, forecast, and we looked at heat, transport, and electricity. What is the share of renewables in these areas? And we are now in this little above 20%. Today, and we can see that it's actually in the heat sector where we are around 23, but the box is bigger because indeed heat consumption is a sizable part of energy consumption, and indeed renewables in transport is smaller, and in electricity we are proportionally at the highest. And then if you look at the box on the right, so you can see that all the yellow parts should grow radically, and we should not go actually anymore to 40% after the REPowerEU. We have shifted the target to 45, 42.5 plus 2.5. It's complicated, but anyway. So that's the direction. Next, please. Then one of the key tools to achieve this type of renewable increase is the Renewable Energy Directive, which is being negotiated currently. We hope to finish it very, very soon. And what it has are, three focus areas. Of course, integration of renewables into the grid, because that grid is used then for many, many uses. And there it's about storage, it's about technologies, it's about cross-border work and so on. And there are also new financial tools like power purchase agreements and contract for difference and things like that, which are now introduced to accelerate this process. Then more incentives to electrify. So basically, we want to electrify anything we can and what we cannot. So then there we bring in other solutions such as renewable hydrogen. And that hydrogen is, of course, focusing on industry, uses those famous hard to abate sectors, as we call them. And now there's a lot of talk about heat pumps. It's the buzzword in town, and EVs, of course, electric vehicles, you know that. So these are the things where the focus is on now. And then obviously energy efficiency and circularity in all of this, because we don't have enough space to build renewable infrastructure to just replace what we do with fossil. So we have to change the way we operate. And here comes actually waste heat recovery is one big thing which is called for. You see then below the pictures some targets which were the set in the 55 stage in the renewable energy directive. So at that time it was 40% renewables in the mix, 49 in the buildings, and then indeed heating, cooling, and district heating sub-targets as well. Now, the bar below was the starting point with repower, where because of the Russian attack, so we needed to upgrade the targets. Now, those numbers take with a pinch of salt because the negotiations are underway, so it won't be exactly like that. And we know that already from the information that is public, but the work is not done, so I didn't want to put here what we are hoping to get or expecting to get. Just mentioning biomethane production, that's quite important part of the repower work. So we're going to double biomethane here, so that's super important. And then indeed, this all connects to energy system integration through electrification and waste heat uptake. Let's go next. This is about electric vehicles 2020-2030. The only thing why I show this is actually that this shows a challenge, and particularly to cities, to the, how do you manage the grids in cities? How can they handle a huge uptake in electric vehicles? So that takes work on the grids, but it also provides an opportunity to use those in the future as a storage medium when we get to the vehicle to grid technologies. Next, please. Yep. And this is then about the energy system integration, what I bring here. The point here is that it's a strategy we published a couple of years ago, and it has like three different pillars. It's the focus on energy efficiency and circularity, which you see on the bottom of the pyramid, showing that this is the key point. Then the second aspect is on deep electrification. And okay, well, and they're electrifying as much as we can with renewable energy. And on the top of the pile, you have then using those low carbon fuels where we cannot get renewables in, and that's, for instance, hydrogen. And what the change of the logic is that you would go, and that's a figure on the right, the green one. So you get from this linear energy system where you have in silos the transport flows, the mining area, for instance, mining extraction, plus then households, for instance. So all are running the electricity, the oil, the gas, they are in silos. They are not connected anyhow. This is wasteful. So we want to move to the right to this circular picture where we have an integrated sort of join-up system where these different uses of energy are connected. So you can use waste from one or the other area, you can get efficiencies, and this way go forward. And this is something that is necessary, actually, if we want to reach those climate neutrality targets that we're aiming at. And it does cost something. We have put here the 400 billion figure per year, and that gives you an idea what we're talking in cost terms. But then there are the benefits, which we always have a difficulty of putting a figure on. Next, please. And then, yes, here I'm just zooming into a couple of parts at the pyramid. There's the energy efficiency part, which is pretty clear. Big sort of investment needed into that. And then there's the yellow box, the second yellow box, where you get into the circularity again. And here we come to the waste heat. We also come to waste to energy in that area. So that's just to see that, or to say that, okay, we want to start taking into use these resources that have been underused so far. That's the point. And in the blue box, indeed, we talk about let's build a system where these kinds of waste streams that cannot be recycled, reused, so that those will then go for energy production. And then indeed go for whatever is least energy intensive. So that's a goal. And there are many examples. I had good discussions in Greece with one city about exactly this. What can they do? And they had not done anything basically in the area of, let's say, biomethane production or waste. So that is something new to them. Now my last slide, or well, almost last. This here is my favorite. So basically what I'm arguing here is that the Commission is working top down and bottom up. So top down, that's our legislation work, but that's only as useful as the uptake of that legislation and implementation. And therefore we work bottom up through voluntary initiatives, and you have several logos there. There's the Covenant of Mayors, Smart Cities Marketplace, there's the Energy Poverty Advisory Hub, Clean Energy for EU Islands, and the Climate Neutral and Smart Cities Mission, and so on. And these are excessively important, actually, for us to help the local these stakeholders do what we are kind of preaching, and then for us to get the feedback on what goes well, what doesn't go well, so that we interact and we can correct the direction if something is wrong. And you have a picture of the city's energy saving sprint. Why do I advertise it here? Because this is about the Ukraine war situation, the energy crisis you've all seen, we all felt that, and we needed to cut consumption, in this case of natural gas, just to keep up some kind of a lid on the prices. I mean, at least to reduce that. And here the Covenant of Mayors launched this energy saving sprint, asking cities to voluntarily join in finding ways to reduce energy consumption. That was a great initiative. And unfortunately, we will have to continue that next year, because next winter, this year actually, next winter is going to be a tough one in energy security terms. And then my last slide. And I'm just putting here the Covenant of Mayors. Okay, it's the doyen of these initiatives I mentioned, but it's also the one which is connected closest to regulation, actually. And member states are using references to Covenant as a way of implementing their national energy and climate plans. I hope there will be even more of that. Now there's an evaluation of those famous plans that deliver on the Paris Agreement, and therefore we hope that this will be developed. And I'm looking at my right to Mr. Griffroy, who is doing extremely important work at the Committee of Regions, sort of assessing options and developing strategies on how we could make more use of the Covenant of Mayors, but not only, also the other initiatives, get the synergies going. And that's something that is going to be on our table soon. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Eero, for this overview. As you stay for the panel, I would suggest that I allow now questions just if you didn't get something right, if it's a question of not understanding something. Otherwise, I would suggest we keep the discussion for later for the whole panel. So if there are no questions about clarifications, no, there are not, that's good. Then I'm happy now to invite the members of the Committee of the Regions to share their perspective how waste to energy can serve the people in their regions, cities, and municipalities. You're both members of the ENVE Commission of the Environment, Climate Change and Energy, which is responsible for coordinating the Committee of the Regions' work in fields related to the European Green Deal, including circular economy, zero pollution, climate change, energy and space policies. So I'm happy to give the floor first to Kata Tütü. She's the Deputy Mayor of Budapest since 2019, responsible for utility management, including waste, water, street lights, and public transport. And she's also chairing the operational group responsible for the city's responses in the COVID-19 pandemic. She's an economist by education. Kata is also vice president of the Party of European Socialists group in the Committee of the Regions. There, she has been rapporteur on a number of major opinions concerning climate and circular economy. She was inter alia the rapporteur for the opinion on the role of waste to energy in the circular economy. And currently, she's rapporteur on the opinion on gender equality and climate change towards mainstreaming the gender perspective in the European Green Deal. Kata, now I would be happy to hear your statement.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And yes, so we were just talking before this panel. I'm also not the expert, I'm the policymaker category, so not the expert category on waste, but I have been dealing with waste and thinking about waste for a long time. And I would like to share like part of my journey as deputy mayor, as a city leader, on how I've been thinking about waste to energy in the past 8 years. Because it was a very different time. When we worked together, I was writing opinion for the Committee of the Regions. We say that this is the voice of the cities in Europe, this body, the Committee of the Regions, about what is the future of waste incineration, because we have the circular economy strategy. Should there be waste incineration in the future? That was the big question back then. And what we were looking at is that, okay, we need to stop landfilling waste. So that was the main goal. We have this target, stop landfilling, try to keep all the waste in the circulation, have a high recycling rate, but of course, above all, somehow prevent waste. Okay, the big question was, can you get from a very high landfilling rate to a very high recycling rate without building an incinerator? I'm only talking about, about municipal waste, cities, so not industry, not agriculture, municipal waste. So that is still a big question for cities. So can you go from high landfilling to like very low, under 10% without building an incinerator? And back then, we were gathering a lot of examples that it is possible. So we've seen zero waste cities putting on their flags and actually make it a reality in a short time, in 10, 15 years, getting from high landfilling to high recycling. But a lot of things have to be present at the same time to get there. You need to have the local level be responsible for the whole waste management. You need to have all the power in the local level. You need to have a lot of ambition, because it's a very, very hard work to get there. But it is an option. I always share to everyone that it's still an option, but a lot of things have to be present at the same time to get there. Very high recycling rate. Let's see the case of Budapest. Budapest has a waste incinerator for decades now. since the 1980s. Hungary is a country where this is the only waste incinerator. In Hungary, there's a very high rate still of landfilling, so it's like over 50%. And Budapest, the capacity we have for incineration, it could cover all of the municipal waste we are producing in Budapest. We have a district heating system, and this incinerator actually feeds the district heating and produces electricity. But of course, we put down a strategy because we are one of the Covenant of Mayor cities from the beginning. We are one of the climate neutral cities in the climate neutral mission. And in our strategy, we see that the future is somehow to prevent waste. So, of course, it's not just in our hands as cities, and of course, recycling as much as possible. So we did the door-to-door selection, separate selection system with EU money, like more than 10 years ago, but we are stuck. So even though we have the bins in every household in Budapest for plastic, for paper, for metal, we could not move forward. So it's still, and really it has many factors, of course, why it's there. But even with very good intentions and with a lot of ambition and with a door-to-door separation system, it's not easy. And what happened in the past years? First, the COVID pandemic came. How this affected waste? We've seen a lot of more waste generated, a lot of more packaging, and of course there were a lot of security issues. We had no idea that if the waste will be infected with the COVID. So we had to rethink about waste management and what will happen, because we were thinking about, okay, we have all these goals on the European level that there will be no plastic in the future, so you don't need a waste incinerator because we will take it out, and the legislation will make industry use different sort of waste. Then comes a crisis like this, and it's all like you have to like rethink it. What happened with the already separately collected plastics? We couldn't sell it to anyone. There was a supply chain disruption. Originally, we were shipping it probably to China. Nobody was taking it over. So what happened to that waste? We had to incinerate it. Of course, and then the pandemic was over, the market reopened, and then came the energy crisis. So I was dreaming with kilowatts and gigajoules every day, because in Hungary, even the municipalities weren't protected, like governmentally, from the price increases, which meant that we've seen in gas prices a 10-fold increase, and in electricity prices a 15-fold increase of electricity price. So I started looking at the waste trucks in a different way. I've seen every waste truck as like 40 gigajoules of energy in it. So to understand how the waste incinerator's end product, we heat the district heating system and produce electricity, the same amount that is enough to cover all the electricity needs of the street light of Budapest. So again, we had to rethink about what we see in the future of waste incineration. And I always say you cannot make big decisions in crisis, but we do have a dilemma, because from my heart, I would say I don't want to do waste incineration. I want to do recycling, because I've seen very good examples on separate collection of bio-waste, textiles, metal, plastic, and of course in prevention. But I see that reality always rewrites a lot of our plans. And we were talking about this before, that I would really love to see in like 20 years or 30 years time. Just one thing we were talking about, just to mention the dilemmas. We are talking a lot about separate collection and recycling. Still, we have this door-to-door system. Even the separately collected waste is very polluted. So we've built an after separation line. So how do you call it? So you have the separate thing, and then you have to, sort it out, to recycle it, because in the end, what we see, you have all this plastic in the bins, but most of the plastic that's there cannot be recycled, cannot be reused. You have to incinerate it. So we've built a plant, but we talk a lot about creating green jobs. Well, this is not a job you want to create. So because we try to make an automated system for this after collection of waste. But it's impossible still. So it's a new one, it's a new line, it's called an automated system, but still you need like at least 20 people who looks through what comes out from the garbage cans. And that is a job you don't want to create for people. I cannot even find people to work there. So I'll stop now and then we will go back with the questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gata. Also for giving already food for thought and for the discussion later on. Before the discussion, I'm happy to introduce Andries Griffra, the next speaker. He's a member of the Flemish Parliament and the second vice president of ENVI Commission in the Committee of the Regions. He's from the European Alliance Group. Andries Griffra graduated as an industrial engineer. And before being elected into the Flemish Parliament in 2014, he had his own energy consultancy firm. In the Flemish Parliament, he chairs the Climate Committee and focuses on dossiers such as energy, climate, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Andries is also first vice president of the Belgian Senate. We are very much looking forward to your speech.
Thank you. Thank you all to be here. And I will come in my second part of my statement back to the story of Budapest, because now I see that we are Europe, but we are in fact different parts of Europe. And I will explain how we try to manage it in Flanders. And I come back to the basic because I can understand what you are saying, that incinerating waste is not a beautiful picture, even if you can connect that with a waste to energy and with district heating. But the question is, do we have another possibility? That's the question. So if you talk about enhancing high-level material recycling is essential in the transition toward the circular economy. And for that, the waste to energy is for me a key component to facilitating this transition, as there's also compatible and complementary with recycling in the circular economy. It's in fact the preferred treatment option for waste that cannot be recycled in the present context and is the equivalent of decontamination. Not only it can generate energy with high efficiency, of course, but it is also to take away the toxic substances in what is the rest waste. And that's very important because through this high temperature, we can take these toxic substances out of materials and out of the environment. And so long that we cannot recycle everything 100%, we need these incinerations. And for me, is then okay, if you then need these incinerations for this small part of waste, let us say like that, with this high temperature, then you have to connect it to your, for example, district heating and energy and electricity supply, etc. So that's for me the most important part. So when I looked into Flanders, you have two parts of waste. You have, of course, your industrial waste. This is private. Private collecting, private recycling, private incinerations, connected with steam, connected with electricity power generation, etc. And then you have your domestic waste. Domestic waste, this is what I found, and that's also what you said. This is a responsibility for your local authorities. This is not what you have to give to the private players, because then they will picking. That's our duty. And then our duty is to collect it, in fact collected in different parts. You see that in Flanders, you have your blue bin for the PMD. You have the bio-waste, you have all the rest, but you have also paper, you have, I don't know if you call it a container park, you have a lot of possibilities where you have to separate everything. Even glass, for example. Sometimes I'm just wondering a little bit what I've seen sometimes that they put it once together and then, yeah, you're laughing, but I can show you a picture in Antwerp, for example, where they put transparent glass and brown glass and green glass all together once again, and then they do the recycling. But there is a recycling process, and they use it as, once again, the raw material for new products. For example, from PMD, the shampoo, bottles of shampoo, they're made from recycled PMD. That's what, for example, the Pont de Nemours is doing. But you have always this kind of risk where you have this, let's just say, unhealthy products in it. And you cannot get rid of that. And the only possibility to get rid of that is the incineration, because you can go till the temperature of 1,250 degrees. And you know, when you go to 1,250 degrees, that's, for example, what they're doing sometimes also for hospital waste, etc. Then everything is out. And in fact, you can also recycle some base materials and some base metals. So for me, the waste to energy is your last part of your whole waste policy. And of course, it's like you said, I'm also dreaming of in 20 to 30 years that we don't need anymore these waste to energy installations, because we have all our circular economy. We have our eco-design of our products made just like that, that we have not bad materials inside our products so that we have to go to an incineration installation. That's one. Secondly, what I also see now in Flanders is that, of course, the most of the incinerators that we have here now in Flanders are in fact too big, because they are built 20, 30 years ago. And 20, 30 years ago, we had in fact more waste and we put everything together. Now we are more recycling, we have more split up, etc., etc. So in fact, are a little bit too big. And what you see then, and that's in fact the risk, is that certainly we see in Flanders that about 50% of the municipalities are shareholder of a waste incinerator or joined in with the private one. But because they have not enough income in their waste, they have to buy industrial waste. And sometimes this industrial waste coming then from other countries. And then you can think what I am doing now. So the whole question that we see now is that maybe we have to rid off these smaller installations that we have sometimes, and really talk about small installations. And then comes the other question based from the local authorities. Yes, but you know, we like to keep the smaller installation because we are thinking about to have a district heating system, let us say, in a couple decades. And that's a third trick part. You cannot do it in a reverse way. You cannot say, because Flanders is a gas grid region. And now I will say, okay, I put the district heater, and for that reason, I need this waste incinerator. No, that's a reverse way. For me, the waste incinerator, you have to have a good dimension of the waste incinerator because of the efficiency of the whole installation, because of the efficiency of your investment. And after that, because you have this well-dimensionated waste incinerator with the highest efficiency for this smallest part or the last part that you have still in your waste, then you can say, okay, what output do you have? Producing electricity and producing heat. And then you can say, okay, I can connect on that district heating system, but not in the reverse way. So that's in fact my conclusion for my statement. One, waste incineration, waste to energy, we always need that. Still, we have no other products and we have not a 100% circular economy. To be careful as local authorities that you don't have to buy industrial waste, sometimes also from other countries, because your installation is too big. And the third part, district heating is very nice, but it's not that your waste incinerator has to be dimensionated on the district heating, but in the vice versa. You first build your waste incinerator based on what you need, and then you can look afterwards to your district heating dimensionation. Thank you.
Thank you. So size matters very much. The situation seemed to be very different. In Flanders, you say you have almost too many waste to energy plants. They could even offer space for some other waste, which you don't want to get from abroad, if I understand it correctly. Whereas in Hungary, there's only one waste to energy plant and you rely still a lot on landfilling. It's not always, it's sometimes tricky to get the right balance and to be self-sufficient and then also to however, to allow to maybe help others, at least in an interim time, to treat their waste. I think that could be also the topic of hot discussions. But I would like to kick off the discussion with asking you, how have the citizens in Budapest and in Flanders been impacted by the current energy crisis? And did the crisis change the way that cities approach waste to energy?
Well, the citizens of Budapest and Hungary were like mildly affected because of governmental regulation, fixed prices for electricity and gas. It was a special system still in power. But the municipalities were affected. So there was no protection for the municipalities, for all the public services. So I've seen electricity price increase in street light, like, as I said, like tenfold, and the public transport. We had to stop the gas buses in Budapest because we couldn't afford, and had to put back the diesel buses because we couldn't afford the gas. I mean, it's the whole energy crisis brought a lot of very bad decisions and situations, but of course, hopefully it's over, or maybe not. But still, I always say that I was monitoring closely waste in Budapest, because I always say that from waste you can understand what's happening on the citizens level. And one way to monitor how inflation in general, and we still have a very high inflation, over 20% in Hungary. So through waste, you can understand what's happening on citizens level. So if you monitor the waste flow, see how it's decreasing, what's happening, you can try to understand. We had a lot of hypotheses what will happen. One is that because of high inflation, people will buy less. And the second is that we had the fear that people will burn waste domestically. That was the biggest fear. So still we have a lot of places where you can put in the plastic. You cannot, I mean, it's forbidden, but still it happens. And that's the worst thing, to burn waste at home. So we were monitoring closely what's happening. I was expecting much worse situation than it actually happened. This is what I can add.
The story of Budapest, compared with the story of Flanders, is the best proof. The story of Budapest and the story of Flanders is, for me, the best proof that a one-size-fits-all solution doesn't exist. This has to come from the bottom up. From your situation is different from my situation. That's very important. That's one. Do we have, based on the energy crisis, what we have seen is that also waste becomes more expensive. Because waste is a part of your product. And if you need more euros to pay to produce a product, then your waste is also more expensive. And the moment that we had seen that the energy prices were going up was after the COVID period. So economy was growing. Then you have always, waste was a little bit more expensive than before, because it's a question of demand. By us, there is a system of pricing that district heating cannot be higher in price than the gas price. Because if you not have that kind of regulation, where we never have district heating in the future, because we have a gas grid. So we have to look if we can change this gas grid to heat grids. So if you have not that kind of regulation, you can never have district heating. So that's a regulation. But mostly these are also long-term contracts. And then you see suddenly the tension between, for example, companies, factories, etc., who has this long-term contract of district heating. And so long the prices, all prices are stable, it's not a problem. But then we have this peak of energy price, we have the peak of waste price, etc. So this was really a bottleneck for the waste to energy installations, comparing to the people who have said, no, I have a fixed contract with a fixed price. So this was really a tough problem. Third, on the long term, there you see, of course, that the security of supply is very important, or has become very important. Gas is not coming from Europe. Norway is even not Europe. Yeah, it's Europe, but it's not Europe. Yeah, you know, European Union. Yeah, or it's coming from Russia and Qatar, etc. So it's all coming from outside of Europe. And waste is in fact our waste. It's maybe strange to say it, but it's our waste. The only thing that we have to be very careful is that we don't produce more waste because we need more energy. Please, the first thing that we have to do is be more efficient on the waste side, try to more recycling and more circular economy, and also on the energy side, you need also to be so efficient as possible. But if you have this last part of waste that you can use in your waste to energy, then it's our source of energy. And it's not the source of energy which is coming from outside of Europe.
Yeah, so you mentioned a very important topic, security of energy supply, and waste indeed is a local energy source. Based on this, I would like to ask Eero about the definition of heat and cold in the Renewables Directive, where the waste, heat and cold definition is a bit difficult to understand. And some stakeholders think that heat and cold from waste to energy is not covered by the definition of waste heat in the Renewables Directive. But wouldn't this be counterproductive towards the targets to improve energy efficiency and to use the energy produced from the unavoidable, non-recyclable waste as much as possible for the energy supply to secure, for security of supply reasons?
Yeah, very tough question, actually, in the sense that we are in the middle of discussing this. So I went through, I spoke indeed to my colleagues who are negotiating that directive. And there are different opinions on the issue, and it is not yet, the clarification is not yet there. But what we can promise is that there's going to be a guidance from the Commission on that. So that is actually in the making. So there we will go to the nitty-gritty on how to interpret that part. But indeed, you're a bit ahead of the process. So we have to get to the bit further on the directive to be able to answer that. So that's the procedural answer. And I'm sorry to leave it at that. But I think the general push here is, of course, for energy efficiency and all those things that you mentioned. So that's the direction we're going. So we're looking at all solutions to get to those goals. And now, if you look at the discussion around waste, so it goes to very much to what Andis here mentioned about this point that you made. Please don't create more energy, more waste to burn it for energy. That's actually indeed the thing. And I had a discussion here with a group of an energy company and a recycling company the other day, who presented a very nice sort of plan that they have, which they're actually implementing. It's not just a plan; they're doing it. It's a project of like sort of second level or higher level. Recycling, reuse, and also waste to energy, everything connected. So what they do there is basically they take, in that case, municipal waste, and they do a bit like in Budapest, you said. So they do a second level industrial resorting of that in order to get to high quality materials. And then they have a lot of demand actually from industry, and this is happening in Finland. So there's a lot of demand from the industry who want this these materials instead of raw materials because of their own carbon footprint and you know, carbon neutrality or climate neutrality goals. So they are, here's a plan. I mean, these guys, so they want to use 90% get into recycling, well, reuse basically, and create like high quality reused materials. And this is a problem that often that the materials that are recycled materials, it's not high quality, it's quite low because of, you know, bad sorting. So we're looking at that. And then, of course, then there's the part that you cannot recycle. I mean, the non-usable. And this goes to waste to energy. And in this case, I'm just giving this example because it's quite interesting. So here what the company says, and it's an energy company, which is involved here. So they say, okay, look, for us, it would make most sense to burn the maximum now because prices are high. So we would really make money that way, actually. And we are a bit ahead of a curve with all this high level, you know, high quality materials. But okay, we do this because we believe that this is the next step. You know, there will be a market for this. So we do it now at our expense, and therefore they get about 5% goes to waste to energy, and then another 5-6% goes to biomethane. You know, from the biodigestate, is that the correct word? Biofraction. Yeah. So that's a bit the thing. So this is a bit where like Commission is also aiming at this. I'm not sure we are there yet, even in regular terms. But then there's this crisis situation where all of a sudden the energy is so important, and you have this push indeed to do less, to recycle and do more with that. But okay, I got a bit carried away, but I think the point is here that indeed we're looking into this, and waste to energy is actually very much on the table, and that indeed was confirmed by colleagues. But we have to probably look at that text clearer and to see so that it becomes useful for basically you.
Yeah, and quality recycling, you mentioned, that is also really a hot topic and a very important one. As recycling is not an end in itself, you need a certain quality and don't risk to pollute, to spread pollutants to the environment. We have some more time for discussion. Yes. Yeah, because one lady, Asa Virkström from the European People's Party from Sweden, couldn't make it. But that means that we have a little bit of more time. You will give me the red card when we have to stop, because I would like to open the floor to the audience. Do we have the time? Okay, so I imagine that there are questions or comments from the audience. While you are thinking, I will go to an online question, which we received in the meantime. So I have to read it out. What avenues exist to bring forward innovative waste to energy solutions in a timely manner that are not considered in current policy directions? The climate change crisis should allow for more efficient access for such solutions, but it seems as if local officials refer to European policy restrictions for such innovative solutions, including non-incineration waste to energy technologies. That's a tricky one, but I think that's... Should I read it again? It's a bit long. What avenues exist to bring forward innovative waste to energy solutions in a timely manner that are not considered in current policy directions? The climate change crisis should allow for more efficient access for such solutions, but it seems as if local officials refer to European policy restrictions for such innovative solutions, including non-incineration waste to energy technologies.
Very good question, certainly. Now it doesn't really define what are those okay. Yeah. But I think what are the avenues? When we look at the word timely manner, so then that gives an idea. We're talking about 2030 or something like that. If we look at our goals, which are in 2030 and of course 2050 ultimately. So that gives a bit of time, not so much time. I think now we have of course, all kinds of avenues, be it from the research side. So if you're looking at developing or testing or demonstrating such technologies, whatever they are. So yes, you have, of course, the Horizon Europe programs. You have the LIFE program, which funds these kinds of things. You have the Innovation Fund, where you could come up with very innovative things. LIFE covers energy, environment, and climate. So it's kind of like covers all that area. So which is relevant for waste to energy as well. I mean, these are the kind of like funding channels, if we put it this way. But then I don't know. I mean, it's not such a clear question that I can elaborate about. I don't know if my co-panelists.
I think what I think is that without actually understanding who is stuck with what,
yeah,
it's very hard to answer this question, because somebody's like concretely stuck with innovation.
there is a problem. Yeah.
When I reread the question, you know, and that kind of discussions here, waste to energy. We are talking about innovation. We're talking about waste. We are talking about energy. We're talking about a lot of different things in one, let us say, one installation. And sometimes what I've felt already on the market, if I can say that, or within the stakeholders, that everyone is fighting for his own piece. And someone wants to have as much as possible waste to the incinerator, but the incinerator is not big enough. The other one wants to have more technology, more innovation. The other one said, no, you don't need incineration, but it's all because they have in fact a little bit high agenda, and all they try to influence everything what's happening on the European policy level. And that's what is feel really, because it's very interconnected. We can say, of course, district heating connected with waste energy is fantastic, but you cannot high up your waste because I need more district heating. Yeah, but you say, of course, but I can give you examples of people who are thinking the reverse way, because they have profit if they have more waste that they can bring from outside. Or, for example, that's the same with the biomass. That's the same thing. I have seen in Germany a boat coming to on the river with trees like this and a length of 30 meters, biomass, 300 megawatts electrical. And then I say, what are we doing now? And this was coming not from Germany, but these trees are coming from Poland. And I say, we see it also in Flanders. We have 2 big installations where the biomass is coming from Canada. Yeah, what are we doing there at that moment? And then they come to the Flemish government and they say, yeah, but you know, because of the electricity prices is down or high or we need more support. Then they say, okay, what profit are we working now? For who are we working now? So we have to always be very, very careful with that. And I know, for example, that the whole market, if you talk about the waste in Flanders, the whole market, what we can have, let us say, and capacity for producing biomethane, this is restricted because, yes, I have some potato factories where you can use that. I have some vegetable factories where I can use that, but I will not create potato factories because I want to have waste. No, we are creating potato factories because we want to eat chips. And of course, if you have the waste because of this factory producing these chips, then we can use that for our waste to energy installation, but not the reverse way. And you see this different profit thinking of the different stakeholders, which are sometimes very in contradictory with each other. Tricky part.
Yeah, too complicated for me. I fully get your argument and the sense of course, the dimension should come from the waste and not from the output from it. But what I fear is that for me, maybe we can live without waste to energy, but I'm not sure we won't. That's another question. That's why, and for me, waste to management is really a global issue, not only a European one. And Europe is at the forefront of what happened, and we are an example in terms of legislation. And I think that it would be a shame that a distorted use of waste to energy facilities in Europe deserve at the end the whole management issue globally, because it has an influence of the image of waste to energy plants. So the question is, the solution is not isn't it a solution in controlling the input of waste to energy to be sure that waste to energy plants only, treat the non-recyclable fraction of waste. And then, if we get to this point, we don't put the effort on hitting on the wrong. We focus on the right battle. It's just.
Yeah, but okay, here's the dilemma. Building a waste incinerator is a very big investment. It's a lot of money. You don't build it for 5 years, you build it for the long run. Okay. And if you have it, you feed it. Even if you are a municipality, you will feed it. And there is a lot of legislation going on. A lot of ambitious goals on the European levels. And if I take it seriously, our common decided goals, there shouldn't be much waste left in 20 years to be incinerated. Municipal waste. Because if I look at all our goals, the packaging waste, that anything that has energy value will be taken out. Paper will be taken out fully. Plastic, taken out fully. Non-recyclable plastic will be non-existent due to the plastic strategy. Most of the plastic will be replaced by biodegradable packaging. So if I take seriously all of our common commitment and legislation, in 20 years, there shouldn't be much left to burn in the municipal waste because we will take out the bio-waste and make biogas. But I know that this is the theory, and I have no idea what will happen in reality. But this is why we always say it's really hard to design, the capacity, because I see in many places, regions, that I don't think there's another way than to build a waste incinerator where there's like very high landfilling and like zero, that people didn't start on the green road to recycle. So coming from like 0 to very high recycling, it takes a lot of effort. So for some, they have to build an incinerator, but they have to be very wise in choosing the capacity, because then they will have to feed it, and they will feed it. So these are dilemmas we're facing. Of course, now in the energy crisis, we don't know how long will this last, because we thought that the COVID will change our lives and worlds, and now we're back to pre-COVID times. Like I wasn't betting for that we will be in crowded places again anymore, but we are. We don't know what will happen this winter and next winter. Maybe everything will go back as it was before. We don't know. We see a lot of energy investments going on, a lot of renewable investment going on. If I take seriously what's happening on our European goals, energy prices should go down in 20 years. But I don't know what will happen in reality. I don't know.
I think you are fully right. If you look to, for example, our region, the quantity of waste is decreasing. And this means that, in fact, the population has to pay more because the cost is the same. And you have, for example, we have these yellow bins and we have the blue bins, and you see that after each 2, 3, 4 years, this goes up with 5 to 10%. And then the explanation is that we have less waste and we have the same cost. So it's, in fact, it's contradictory. But at the end, you will always have, till now, let us say, but I think at least some decades, these contaminated material streams which are in your waste. And so long as we have this, we need this incineration. And if you have done this incineration, yeah, of course, then you do it on the highest efficiency, and this means also the waste to energy. And of course, I agree with you. Even if I'm looking in that philosophy, it's very difficult for someone who has to invest in that kind of waste to energy to, let us say, think in the future how many contaminated waste we will have, and so that we have that's kind of the size of your installation. This will be very difficult because it's like you said, they built such an installation for 20, 30 years. That's true. But that's the whole discussion that we have to do. How many waste do we really have? How many can be decreased? How many can be recycled? And what is then the rest, which is contaminated and which has to be at the moment incinerated?
Exactly.
Can I, yeah, to connect just to quickly. I wonder, this dimension problem is an issue, and it just funny thought, but we are discussing in the nuclear field, we're talking about small modular nuclear reactors. It's about size, it's about these kinds of issues, and maybe we should have a small modular waste incinerator. I don't know. Just you know,
This exists.
This exists. Okay, okay. Well, then we have it. But I fully agree that to some extent, these kinds of toxic waste that you're talking, you know, probably there's no way around it. And the other thing, I was having a meeting with a big multinational company here, actually today, and they were talking about their reuse and recycling and materials in Europe. And they said, look, they have difficulties of transporting them from one country to another one. In this case, it was, I think, from Hungary to Netherlands, if I remember correctly, was that. And they said that this is quite amazing because, you know, normal raw materials cross borders easily, but when it's recycled materials and waste, so then controls are a bit different. And so there are certain things probably would have to do, because those incinerators as well, when there's not enough local production, so then probably you might want to then, and they do already import then suitable waste. So that's that. And the very last point, those tree trunks, I think that once the renewable energy directive
Those before,
yeah. it will stop, because indeed that type of material will not be allowed.
Beginning of 2000. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Although I have the feeling that now the discussion just got lively. I'm sorry, I got from the organizers a sign. I have to finish the panel, but it's just the first panel. And I hope that you can still stay with us and we can continue the discussion, because there are so many other points. You mentioned also source separation and after sorting. Again, that's a very important point as well. The right size matters, waste shipment versus self-sufficiency, district heating, how to help the cities to become climate neutral. How can waste to energy help with that? There are so many topics still to discuss, but I think many of them will be discovered, I expect will be discovered now with the next panels. And I would encourage you then to stay here, and we continue the discussions afterwards and during the breaks. Thank you very much for attending this panel. Thanks.
Thanks for coming back, and sorry for being late. We had a bit of a coffee break, and due to that, I'm afraid the second coffee break will not take place because we want to have and decide as much discussion as we possibly can. Yes, we have heard from the first panel from basically the regional and municipality level that forecasts and common policies are very hard to agree about and to come by right now. Also that new technologies come into play, and we'll hear about that a bit more during the next session, basically on the industry. And the first presentation will be done by Alexander Kirchner. He is not in, that will be a remote session. He is General Manager of Wien Energy GmbH and is responsible for the operation of the energy generation and waste utilization plants in Vienna, with a special focus on circular economy. He graduated in industrial environmental protection, waste management and recycling from the University of Leoben, and completed a professional MBA in controlling and finance at Vienna University of Economics and Business. Alexander held positions in various national and international interest groups. So welcome him on the floor.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
So we can start with the presentation. So thanks again very much for the introduction, and many greetings from Vienna. I'm very pleased to be here today and to give you an overview of the thermal waste utilization in Vienna using the example of the Spittelau waste to energy plant. So next one. Here you can see that today the city of Vienna has almost 2 million inhabitants, and it has successfully oriented its waste and recycling management to the waste hierarchy for decades. Top priority here in Vienna is given to the avoidance and the recycling of waste. What is nevertheless produced as waste is collected separately and recycled. The focus is on high quality for the recycled material in order to achieve high recycling rates. When it comes to the non-recyclable waste, and here in particular the residual waste from households, this type of waste is thermally recycled and used for the efficient supply of district heating and also district cooling of the households in Vienna. The result is that no household waste has been deposited untreated at the landfill since 2009. We are very proud of that. And we are also very proud of the fact that we use the best available technology to protect the environment, so that Vienna is now considered the most livable city in the world for many years. Next slide. What you can see here is an overview of the history of the development of the municipal waste generated and treated in Vienna. It's more than 100 years that you can see here. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were about 100,000 tons of waste that was still collected and completely landfilled until the 1960s. When you take a look at the 60s, then you see that there is a red line beginning to evolve. This was the time when Austria's first waste incineration plant was put into operation. It was called the waste-to-energy plant Flötzersteig. And from then on, only a small part of the waste had to be landfilled because there were many other plants that were built afterwards to treat the problem of waste. What you can also see is that in the 1980s, the separate collection of waste began. Today, about 1 million tons of waste are collected in Vienna and either recycled or thermally utilized. The whole system of waste management is functioning very well, I can tell you. Next slide. Yeah, here we see the material flows in Vienna. We have about, well, let's say 780,000 tons of non-recyclable waste that is collected and brought to 4 waste incineration plants. It's still the plant in Flötzersteig that I mentioned before. It is the world's most famous plant in Spittelau, the famous Hundertwasser plant. And it's also the newest plant in Pfaffenau and the fluidized bed incinerator 4. These 4 incinerators, they treat the waste, and afterwards you get the bottom ash. The bottom ash is treated as well, and there are about 170,000 tons per year that are stabilized with concrete. So we use it at the landfill site at Rautenweg, which is also located directly in Vienna. What we also do is that we separate the metals and the non-ferrous metals. It's about 25,000 tons per year. They go back into recycling for the production of steel. Next one. Yeah, and once again, a historic slide, a slide that shows you the development of the district heating in Vienna. And take a look at the orange bar. It's the waste-to-energy bar that you can see there. And district heating generation in Vienna has developed at the same pace as the waste recycling since the 1970s. Today, around 1.8 terawatt hours, or almost 1/3 of the heat supply in one of the largest district heating networks in Europe, is provided by the thermal incineration of waste. So this is a really important point for us here in Vienna to make the supply with waste heat. Next slide. Yeah, here you can see the district heating network. Because the district heating, it increases the independence from the fossil raw materials, and at the same time, it ensures an affordable supply for the citizens. In addition, a large part of the energy production, more than half, is of biogenic origin. and those considered renewable. This also supports the city's decarbonization program, as Vienna aims to become climate neutral by the year 2040. Here you see the district heating network that evolved over the last decades. And you can also see with the orange dots the 4 waste-to-energy plants that we have there. They are evenly distributed across Vienna, and this keeps the transport distances of the waste trucks short. In addition, the energy can be generated at several locations in Vienna and brought to the customers with fewer losses. So we have many advantages with this district heating system that is working together with the waste-to-energy plants. Next slide. Yeah, and in order to set up such a system with several waste incineration plants, strong acceptance by the population is needed. This acceptance has been built over decades, and the waste-to-energy plant Spittelau plays a very special role in this. Here you can see a picture of our plant located in the middle of Vienna. Next slide. And that was the plant in former days, in the 80s. So it looked like a typically normal waste-to-energy plant that you might know from other places. It wasn't looking very, very nice, yeah, some kind of industrial plant, but it changed. So if you go to the next slide, you see one really heavy incident that we had in the year 1987 on May the 15th. The Spittelau was burning and it was destroyed. Substantial damage occurred to the plant, and here you see some pictures after this great fire in the year 1987. So let's go to the next one. But the plant has been rebuilt, and here you see the plant until May 1987. And on the right side, you see the new plant as of December 1992, when it was fully completed. And it is still the same plant that we had in former days. At least the outlook, the facade and so on is still the same. Friedrich Hundertwasser, which you can see on the right side, is a famous painter and architect. He finally took over the redesign of the facade and made a work of art out of the complex. The symbiosis of nature, technology, and art has made the plant very popular in Vienna. And it has massively increased the acceptance of the thermal waste utilization among the population. Today, our plant in Spittelau, it is an attraction. It's an attraction with more than 15,000 visitors per year. And what makes us proud as well, you see the plant and the inside of the plant. We use the best available technology for environmental protection. And please, next slide. And as you can see here, the emissions from the waste-to-energy plant in Spittelau, as well as all the other waste-to-energy plants that we have in Vienna, they are well below the limit values. The limit values are undercut by more than 90%, making this plant and all the others one of the most environmentally friendly solutions for the problem of waste that we have right now. Next slide. Yeah, and when we take a look at the future, we also have to talk about circular economy and the role of waste to energy, because in our opinion, it is an integral part of the circular economy. Also, thermal waste utilization already has great advantages today. It still has much further potential for optimization. It plays a key role in the future circular economy. And why is that? I will explain to you on the next slide. Yeah, here you can see a schematic representation of the perfect circular economy model. Unfortunately, it's written down in German, but I will translate in English. You can see raw materials and energy that are used to manufacture products of our daily life. These products are then used and end up in waste at the end of their life cycle. The waste is collected and recycled as far as possible. Waste that cannot be recycled is removed from that cycle. You can see it on the arrow at the bottom. So this is the perfect cycle, but it's not everything that is been shown here inside. We also have the non-recyclable waste, and this type of waste occurs everywhere along this life cycle because it's not perfect. Yeah, the production of waste is generated during manufacturing, for example. Certain materials, such as hospital waste, are also generated during the use, and they are also not recycled. And finally, there is also the human factor. No, let's go back. Yeah. Finally, there is also the human factor. The separation quality of waste is not always optimal, especially in the anonymous big cities. So recycling itself also produces non-recyclable waste through downcycling or sorting residues. All these types of waste, they need a solution, also even in a perfect world with a perfect life cycle. Yeah, we need solutions for that in the future. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that the thermal waste utilization can provide that solution, not only now, but also in the future. The recycling of the thermal utilization of non-recyclable waste recovers raw materials after the incineration process, and at the same time, it generates energy. This, in turn, can be used for the manufacture of new products again. In this way, the cycle is closed, and at the same time, a removal of pollutants is achieved. Waste to energy is therefore an integral part of the circular economy, and even more, it is a driver. It is a driver for the circular economy of the future. Next slide. Yeah, and besides the incineration process, we also can do municipal waste sorting before the incineration process, what is not done by the population itself. You can get out paper and cardboards, you can get out plastics and polymers, you can get out metals. And after the incineration process, you get the residues, where you can once again make products out of the waste. So here are some examples. You can see it on the pictures from our waste incineration plants. You have, for example, glass directly from our fluidized bed reactor. You have building and construction material, and you have metals after the incineration process that you can put out once again, what is done at the moment. So next slide. Let's come to the end. Here you see the major tasks of the past and the present, and they are already being solved by thermal waste utilization. You have when it comes to waste, you have the reduction of volume, you have the reduction of mass, you have the hygienization of the waste. These are very important tasks that have to be fulfilled by these plants. The second one, you have the energy side. And when it comes to energy, you can produce power, you can produce steam, heating and cooling as well, as we do here in Vienna. So this is another important part of the puzzle. And if we take a look at the future, the focus is on the resources, will be on the resources contained in the waste more than today. Waste must be turned into products again. For this, the material cycles must be completely closed. In addition to metals and non-ferrous metals, as I said before, like aluminum, copper, and so on, the focus today is primarily on carbon dioxide. Carbon capture plants can separate both the biogenic and the fossil components of the waste gases. In this way, the waste incineration plant can not only be made climate neutral, it can even achieve a climate positive effect. This is very important for us here in Vienna, because carbon capture at waste to energy plants is a key element to achieve climate neutrality by 2040. It is a big challenge, but we can do it. We just have to build these carbon capture plants, what we are planning right now at the moment. And if we do that, waste to energy is once again taking on the pioneering role and making its contribution to the energy transition here in Vienna. So this is all that I can say you from our experience in Vienna. This is the end. Let's close the loop together. And I'm open to questions maybe after the other panelists.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for the inspiring presentation, Alexander. Actually, it's quite interesting to see how drastic events like the fire incident can result in creating opportunities, innovation, and even beauty, and of course, acceptance of the plant. Is there Any question related to your presentation from the audience, remote or here in the room? No? So then if there are, we can still come back to them a bit later. I'll now introduce Dr. Ella Stengler to you again, because I did that already once, but I'll do it again shortly. She is the Managing Director of CWEP, the Confederation of European Waste to Energy Plants, since July 2003. Before that, she was Managing Director of ETAD in Germany, and previously she headed the Public-Private Partnership Organization, AGS. So please, Ella, take the floor.
Here I am again. CWEP is the European Umbrella Association of the operators of waste-to-energy plants. So they terminally treat the residual non-recyclable waste from households and similar waste from commerce and industry. And they recover the materials and energy from this unavoidable, unrecyclable waste. CWEP members treat 81 million tons of this residual waste per year in 410 plants. And the majority of them operates through public-private partnership. So a kind of public-private partnership is almost involved in all kind of operation. Sometimes the public owns the plant, and sometimes it asks the private sector to operate it, or vice versa. In a certain way, it's almost all are somehow bound in public-private partnership. Next one, please. Yeah, the main, the really essential task that waste-to-energy fulfills is treating the waste that is not good enough for recycling, and this serves a hygienic service. It destroys the pollutants embedded in the waste and avoids that they are spread in the environment. And by doing that, it reduces the volume dramatically. 90% of the waste is reduced by that. Next one. Yeah, waste-to-energy provides multiple outputs. You have seen it more or less already with the Vienna plant. I summarize it. From a waste-to-energy plant, you, of course, can deliver to district heating, to cooling. You can deliver steam to nearby industry. You can deliver electricity to the grid. And you can also use excess electricity to produce hydrogen. The picture here you see was a blue bus. That's a bus in Wuppertal. And bless you. And the waste-to-energy plant in Wuppertal supplies hydrogen to fuel the city buses and to contribute to clean public transport. Then the other materials coming out from waste to energy is bottom ash. You can recycle the metals. And from the mineral part, you can use it as an aggregate in road construction. Other materials are from the flue gas cleaning residues, such as zinc and salts, and this can be also recovered. And carbon capture can be, so the captured carbon can be used to use the CO2 in horticulture, to produce new materials like synthetic fuels. Or if there's no market, to permanent storage. I will come back to that later. Next slide, please. So in some cities, waste to energy covers more than half of the population's heat demand. And this is how it can help to reach the climate neutrality goals of the cities. Next one, please. Some examples. One you have already seen was Vienna. But also Brescia is a very nice waste to energy plant. Brescia is an ancient city, and it dates back to the pre-Roman time, but it has a very, very modern waste to energy plant. It treats 730,000 tons of non-recyclable waste per year, and it provides electricity to 200,000 families, and it supplies 70% of the heat in the district heating network. It has a project ongoing that is flue gas condensation and heat pump for further heat recovery. That means you can produce more heat without putting more waste into the plant. Next slide, please. The other example is Krakow. Also a very modern waste-to-energy plant in the oldest city of Poland. That one treats 220,000 tons of non-recyclable waste per year. And the electricity it supplies is sufficient for the whole tram system in the city of Krakow. And it supplies still 12% of the heat to the district heating network. Also, Krakow is investigating this project on flue gas condensation and heat pump to improve energy efficiency without raising the input into the plant. Next one, please. As we are in Brussels, we have to mention Brussels, of course. Brussels treats 500,000 tons of waste. It provides electricity to 65,000 households and district heating for the Dock Shopping Center, and additionally to the greenhouses of the King. And the latter reduces 2,300 tons of CO2 per year. So next one. So waste to energy can help municipalities, the cities and the regions on their way towards carbon neutrality by replacing fossil fuels. Next one. But of course, then the question is, what about the CO2 emissions? Next one. Yes, waste to energy emits CO2, and we have to take care of that. The input or the reason for the fossil CO2 emissions from waste to energy comes mainly from the plastics, from the non-recyclable plastic. And so we have to reduce as much as possible the input of the plastics into the waste to energy plant. And the best way to do it is via efficient source separation, because this also enables quality recycling for plastic as much as possible. And waste to energy offsets its direct fossil CO2 emissions, first via energy recovery, which replaces fossil fuels, also via metal recycling from bottom ash. And this already makes waste to energy in Europe practically climate neutral. But additionally, it also helps to minimize the use of landfills, the space they would need, and divert waste from landfills, which would emit methane. Next one, please. Let me explain it. It looks a bit complicated, but it's less complicated as it looks like. ESWET was publishing a roadmap, a climate roadmap, and we were looking into the CO2 emissions of waste to energy. You see on the left side, if you treat 1 ton of waste, then you produce about 1 ton of CO2. But about 60% of it is coming from a biogenic origin, so it is climate neutral. The fossil part is 40%, and that comes mainly from the plastic waste, from the plastic input. So this means 400 kilograms of fossil CO2 per ton of waste input treated in waste to energy plants. And these 400 kilograms can be offset. First of all, you can save 360 kilograms per ton treated via energy recovery, replacing fossil fuels. And you can save 60 kilograms of CO2 per ton of waste treated via bottom ash recycling. So that means the result is that waste to energy is slightly CO2 negative or climate positive. Would you consider the contribution to landfill diversion, so saving methane emissions, then it would be even more. But here we keep a conservative approach. But from this, more or less offsetting CO2, fossil CO2 emissions, the sector could move to become climate positive or carbon negative with carbon capture. You see here on the right graph, the blue part on the bottom, the minus 500. So saving 500 kilograms of CO2 per ton of waste treated. And this can be achieved with 50% capture rate of CO2. This is also conservative because, for instance, in Oslo, they are going for 90% capture rate. So we have been conservative. If you capture 50% of the CO2, then you can achieve negative carbon emissions of 440 kilograms per ton of waste treated. Next slide, please. So, and this is, of course, why carbon capture and use and storage projects are kicking off across Europe in order to help the sector to make it carbon negative. But we can always dream. We dream then that in 20, 30 years, we won't need waste to energy, as we have heard before. And we dream also of being climate negative. But there is no free lunch. It will come with a cost, and policy support would be needed for that. Next slide, please. The high costs I mentioned already. Technically, you need additional space for the carbon capture installation. So if you're in the middle of the city center and you don't have the space, bad luck. So this is a technical requirement you need. You need the transport infrastructure to transport the captured CO2. And then the question is also, would it be a barrier maybe for countries who still heavily rely on landfilling? You might say, why wouldn't it be better if they would invest in reducing landfilling rather than investing in carbon capture? And also, it needs some energy. Carbon capture needs some energy. Now, in the energy crisis, energy is very precious. It reduces a bit the amount of energy that you can deliver. There are also policy barriers. Who will get the CO2 credit if you save it? And does it count towards the EU ETS, the emissions trading system? Next slide, please. I guess you all know that there are discussions. The European Parliament wants the waste to energy sector to be covered by the EU emissions trading system. And the policymakers asked the European Commission to come up with an impact assessment if the waste to energy sector should be covered by the EU ETS by 2028. So this has to be investigated. But we have to ask the question, what will happen then with the plastic waste? Because the EU ETS, of course, punishes the input of plastic waste, because this causes the fossil CO2. So if waste to energy plants don't take the non-recyclable plastic anymore, where will it go to? Will the alternatives be more sustainable? Or is there a danger that it will be exported? Or will it be landfilled? Or will there be even illegal routes? We have to seriously investigate that. Also, will there be higher costs for the municipalities? Because the higher costs have to be transmitted to the waste producer, or can be transmitted to according to the polluter pays principle, even to the plastic producers. But also difficult to deal with it in practice. And again, which effect would it have on countries which still landfill a lot? If waste to energy will become more expensive, will it be then more attractive to go to landfill more? All interesting questions. The Commission has to do the impact assessment, and then we will see if the sector will fall under the EU ETS, and then we will have to deal with the impacts. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have seen some concrete examples of today's concepts in action and how they contribute to the cities and regions. And we also have seen that visions are there, but they still need to turn into reality. And we have seen earlier in the first panel that reality rewrites plans. So I think we will make use of that to make these realities. Now I'm coming to the third presentation from Vanessa Fakra. She has 20 years of experience in the energy sector, started working at EDF, where she held different positions, first in R&D and EPR, nuclear plant safety, then on various management positions in nuclear power plants and as technical director of thermal power plant engineering. She joined Hitachi Zosen Innova in 2022 with a focus on regulatory issues and market access. HZI is a leading technology and turnkey supplier in waste to energy and renewable gases, with an installed base representing about 40% of the waste to energy plants in Europe. Vanessa is also a member of ESWET's technical committee. So the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Okay. I'm not, sorry. So I'm really honored to speak about the technological state of the art of waste to energy plant, and that will bring us from the traditional waste to energy facilities to the integrated resource recovery facilities. I will explain why these facilities are indispensable to meet the local needs, in particular in terms of waste management, energy security, for hygienization purpose, and for circularity. I will start with this IPCC report statement. When waste to energy facilities are equipped with appropriate air pollution abatement, they can contribute to clean electricity generation and greenhouse gas emission reduction. And I will also remind that we are today speaking about Europe, but the situation inside Europe is really not unequal and heterogeneous. We have countries with, a saturated market for waste to energy, and we have lots of countries with still over 50% of landfillings. And outside Europe, the situation is even more heterogeneous, since I think we all know here that the waste management issue is mostly, and challenge is mostly global, as waste will represent over 7% of the global CO2 emission in 25 years. So today, we already have over 500 plants which can produce 43 terawatt-hour of electricity and almost 100 terawatt-hour of heat. And most of these plants, we have already explained before, are quite lasting because they are over 20 years. And the industry has been working recently quite hard on new technology bricks that I will present now. That these bricks, as Ella explained, and also it has been also explained in Vienna project. We have resource recovery, we have hydrogen, we have derived fuel production, we have capture and storage, capture and use solution. So I will speak about that. Can you go to the next slide? So we can, sorry, I don't know if, do you still hear me? You can find on these slides most of this technological brick. So you can see the CCOS, the waste to X, so waste to hydrogen and waste to methanol, and the heating and cooling, which has been in continuous improvement over the last year. We don't see the depollution because the depollution, most of the work from a technical point of view has been met already for quite a time. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So it's really a new approach. Today, as Ella explained, if we consider the offset, we can already consider, and the IEA considers that waste to energy facilities, if you consider the offsets and the life cycle analysis of CO2, can already be considered as CO2 and carbon neutral. And if we go to the deployment of these technological and innovative bricks, we will go from a carbon neutral approach to a carbon negative approach. And that's what we call the integrated resource recovery facility, and we consider that it is a step change evolution. Next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to present Hitachi Zosen Innova, but Siegfried already said it, so I will just, as you said, we are a major player in Europe with over 40% of market share in OFW, but we are also a global player what is important is that we treat municipal solid waste, but also organic waste and biomass. So we are also, invested in anaerobic digestion solution and pyrolysis for hydrogen production. We invest a lot in R&D because we really want to remain and to remain at the state of the art and at the forefront of the technology. And we want to prepare the future and to develop the plans for our grandchildren. Just quickly, you will find here the waste to energy plant, and you can see that you have the great combustion part, the energy recovery, the flue gas treatment with the depollution, and the residue. You can see here with the residue treatment, which doesn't appear here. Of course, the waste steam cycle enables us to produce hot water, steam, and electricity. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Our society cannot be truly sustainable without fully addressing its waste challenge. As we said before, the best solution, of course, is first the reduction of waste. And also we need to improve sorting and recycling processes. But even with the best technologies in place, not all the waste is recyclable. And sometimes for different reasons, either it's not recyclable, even the recycling process is not economically viable, or it's not even better from a sustainable point of view. Because it's not because things are recyclable that it's good to recycle them. Because if you look at the life cycle analysis of the process at the end, it's not always better. So that's why if you consider hazardous waste, which cannot be recyclable, and if you consider the residue of all the recycling process and all the residual fraction of non-recyclable waste, we still have a big room for waste to energy, and the thermal treatment remains the best solution in the waste hierarchy management to treat this waste. And it's a really good way to divert non-recyclable waste from landfills. We also know that it provides an hygienization service to the community, and it enables to free land, and it supply local, partly renewable baseload energy, as half of the waste input is considered as biomass. So this brings us to the fact that these waste to energy facilities answer a triple challenge, and I will even say a quadruple challenge. Either supply the circular economy with all the resource recovery, increase the decarbonization efforts, support the energy security, and also serve the pollution reduction, which is not, yeah, thanks. So in terms of energy security, I already said it in introduction. So far, we know that waste to energy provide 142 terawatt-hour of electricity and heat. It thus significantly increase the energy generation and support district heating and cooling and synthetic fuel applications. In the coming years, if we take into consideration in Europe all the countries where we still have over 50% of landfillings, I will refer to the really good report that has been supported by ESWET and done by Prognos and DEF, where they really do the really complete analysis, and they showed that even respecting all the ambition in terms of recycling target, in some countries, of course, the input of waste to energy will decrease, and it is a sense of history. But globally in Europe, the global amount of input will still, in the coming years, increase not so much, but on maybe 20%, we can reach 189, I think, if I remember correctly, terawatt of production of electricity. And you have three ways to increase the amount of energy you produce. The first, of course, increasing the input. The second is increasing the efficiency of the plants. And we still have some room. Ella spoke about heat pump and also flue gas condensation to increase efficiency. And the other way to increase efficiency is to improve the availability and reliability of the plant. And the goal is not, as we said before, to fill the input if we have it, but even though the plants are now, with automation, with digitalization, are more reliable. So before we had like some availability and the plants were not used, were not available during the year. And on this, we improved a lot. So at the end, it will have an impact on the total amount of energy we can provide. Next slide, please. So I think we already spoke about this. Next slide. Okay. So now, slides before. So in terms of resource, slides before, of resource recovery, yeah, so in terms of material recovery, as we explained, half of the plants are already equipped in Europe with IBA, so bottom ash recovery. In this bottom ash, we can recover metals, minerals, and in the fly ash, we can also recover salt, zinc, and heavy metals. We still have lots of room for improvement in technology, because we know that plants, for instance, like Inville in Switzerland, manage to recover a lot of metal from there with dry processing. And we know that now we can go up to an economy of 50 or 60 kilo of CO2 per ton of treated waste, but it can reach 200 kilo if we go to this process. So there is a big room in terms of resource recovery. Next slide. So if we take into consideration all this state-of-the-art technology, we have a potential to recover up to 0.7 million tons of aluminium, which represent 11% of European imports, and 2.4 million tons of ferrous metals, which represent 27% of European imports for Russia. So we show that it increases the security of raw material supply and boosts European economy circularity. Next slide. Waste to X, so waste to hydrogen and waste to fuel are already proven technology. We have the example of Wuppertal, that, as we said, we have the example of Créteil plant, and we also have a plant that we developed today in Bourg, in Switzerland. So we use the electricity for waste to energy to produce hydrogen. So, and we can also use other process, but the main process is this. And we can also, if we capture CO2, mix the CO2 with the hydrogen to create fuels. This hydrogen can be used for transport, as we have seen it in Wuppertal, but I think the most interesting use for me will be really the energy storage, because we have solution for energy storage, short-term energy storage with battery, but we don't have long-term solution for energy storage. And as we all know, in the coming years, with the deep penetration of renewable energy, we will have a lack of baseload solution, especially with the closure of gas assets plant in Europe. And this hydrogen production, I mean, waste to energy plant can become adaptable and flexible way to either produce electricity when the grid needs electricity, or when the need doesn't need electricity because you have too much solar, then it produces hydrogen, it store it like hydrogen or in ammonium or urea, and when we need it, we can use it on the plant as electricity. And and carbon capture, we already spoke about that, so I'm told that I have to hurry up. The carbon capture, just because I'm speaking about the technology, just to let you know that the most common technology is amine technology, and you have already driven and Twents in Netherlands, and we have projects on the go. And now, as Ella spoke about it, so I won't. Yeah. So as we just spoke about it, waste to energy really has an hygienic role. It serves the decarbonization path through hydrogen and fuels for transport, carbon capture, increased efficiency, connection to and support of district heating system. And it serves the circular economy with material recovery, energy recovery, hydrogen, and capture carbon. And it supports, of course, the energy independence need in Europe. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Vanessa. That was a very energetic presentation, and of course, with lots of content and very fast. I mean, you couldn't speak any faster, so that is, and we still didn't make it for the coffee break. So apologies for that. And it's good we have had attendance not only here in the room, but also remotely. There's plenty of questions, but I'm afraid we cannot come to these questions now because otherwise we would mess up also the next panel. So we promise to answer all those questions in the days to come to all of those who have sent them to us. Thanks for your understanding with that regard, and I hand over to the next panel.
All right, everyone. I think we're ready to start the third panel discussion, but indeed the first two conversations already brought quite a lot of food for thought. I'm Aurélie Beauvais, I'm the Managing Director of Euroheat and Power, which is the District Heating and Cooling Association. So we are also on a huge journey to transitioning to cleaner sources and also strengthening our synergies with European cities and citizens. That's why I'm very happy to be here today, and I would like to thank a lot ESWET for enabling us to participate to this important conversation. And the last, indeed, theme of the panel is a bit, it has been the red thread in between everything that has been said so far, which is basically how do we strengthen our links with the citizens? How do we facilitate acceptance for waste to energy plants, but also how do we make them even more performant, environmentally friendly? And how do we also create this whole ecosystem with the cities that would be beneficial for the industry, but also and mostly the citizens? So for this conversation, we are quite lucky to have three amazing speakers, although they are online, but we can feel the greatness from here. Although all of them will be on your screen. So we have Dr. Thanos Bortsalas, which is a lecturer in sustainable development in circular economy and acting director of the Earth Engineering Center at the Columbia University. He investigates ways and technologies for managing the impacts which are associated with anthropogenic activities, and we do produce a lot of waste. But he has also been working a lot in terms of developing the concept of people first around the utilization of waste to energy. He has been recognized globally and at the level of the UN and the IFC World Bank as an expert on this topic. So that's why I'm very happy that he is here to tell us a bit more about this. What is the people first concept? So Thanos, can you hear us?
Yes, of course. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. So I think I'll directly hand over to you for the presentation and introduce our other speakers as it goes. So Thanos, you're here to tell us about something that is dear to your heart, people first in waste to energy. What does it mean? And can you tell us why it matters in the context of this conversation?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today. First of all, before we start, I mean, we developed with the United Nations EC department in Geneva the approach on how to develop public and private partnerships to comply with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And we call this the people first approach. Next slide, please. So these specific guidelines that refer to the waste to energy part discuss and propose these three sine qua non conditions to ensure that all these waste to energy operations will comply and contribute to the circular economy as well as the SDGs through successful implementation of public and private partnerships. Those three conditions are that the waste to energy facilities should only process the post-recyclable fraction. This means the materials that do not have a value in the market or cannot be recycled because of technical limitations. The second part is that we must use sophisticated and state-of-the-art technologies within these waste-to-energy plants to ensure compliance with stringent pollution standards, such as, for example, the European Union's Industrial Emissions Directive. And a very, very important factor is actually to adopt the 5 desirable outcomes of PPPs for the SDGs, which actually could help governments and the industries to adopt better legal and policy frameworks and ensure best governance practices, as well as stakeholder engagement in all these WT projects. A high-level summary of, all this work that we did with the United Nations that lasted for a good 3 to 4 years is that, first of all, that landfills are a major health and environmental problem and need to be scaled down. Even in the most developed countries, they are too prominent, and WTE is a means of ultimately eliminating them, as we're going to explain also later on today. Yet, the waste-to-energy facilities cannot compete with recyclable and compostable products and should only process this non-recyclable fraction. They should be used as a last resource only for this non-recyclable waste, which apparently it's actually very significant. According to some recent estimates, this non-recyclable fraction amounts to over 1 billion tons of waste materials, which apparently ends up sometimes in the open dumps, in the aquatic environment and water bodies, imposing significant threat on public health, obviously, biodiversity and the environment. Speaking of the design, financing, construction, operation and maintenance of waste-to-energy plants, all these plants must ensure that laws and regulations concerning emissions are diligently followed. And to this end, as I mentioned also earlier, these technologies must use all these state-of-the-art air pollution control systems along with stringent environmental and pollution standards. And stakeholders must be duly informed of WT projects and stakeholder engagement made the priority, in particular as cultural factors can play a significant role in local communities' approval of WTE facilities. When we talk, however, about the pace of industrialization worldwide, we must also understand that we talk about 2 sides of the moon. The very first part is actually the developing countries and transition economies that should first work towards an integrated waste management system, enhance the collection of materials and the source separation prior to developing and financing WT facilities for non-recyclable waste, whereas the so-called developed economies should emphasize on sorting of materials so that as little recyclable waste as possible goes to WT plants. Next slide, please. Speaking of these 5 outcomes for of public and private partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals, these 5 PPs that are also summarized in this table are namely access and equity, economic effectiveness and fiscal sustainability, environmental sustainability and resilience, replicability, and stakeholder engagement. All these principles and outcomes are actually at the core already embedded within the circular economy principles. Most notable through its outcome on environmental, for example, sustainability and resilience, but in fact also across all these 5 outcomes. Hence, the idea is that adopting a public and private partnerships for the SDGs compliant approach in WT projects would ensure that the circular economy principles are respected within the waste-to-energy industry, as well as it would also ensure that the projects not only provide value for the planet, but also value for people, which again is at the core of the PPPs for the SDGs approach. Next slide, please. Also part of our assessment with the United Nations for us to understand the specific technologies. It is also a follow-up of the hierarchy of sustainable waste management that was produced by the Earth Engineering Center some time ago, and recently, about a year ago, was amended with the United Nations, and now it's being used by the United Nations. And when we talk about waste materials, even if we have thousands of different types of materials, apparently we do have 2 broad categories. One part is the recyclables. As I said earlier, the materials that can be recycled and have a commodity, it's actually a commodity in the market. And the other part is the post-recycled, which apparently we do have two solutions, either recovery of energy or use of land for the disposition of these materials, the so-called landfilling. Next slide, please. A very big concern from this work that we did with the United Nations was on the utilization and the safe disposition of the waste to energy residues, namely the bottom and the fly ash. As you can see in this graph, we have about 25% bottom ash that is being produced from these operations, and down to 1 to 3% fly ash, which is typically a hazardous byproduct. Next slide, please. So all these regulations must ensure the sustainable disposal and use of all these residues, like what we have seen in Europe, like the production of concrete tiles for waste energy, from waste energy bottom mass. Next slide, please. Or for example, in the Netherlands, as well as in the Scandinavian countries, where they have actually, they're building noise barriers and they're using extensively all these residues for bituminous applications. Next slide, please. Or in Bermuda, in the island here in the Caribbean, where they are using the mixed bottom and fly ash for land reclamation. Next slide, please. Or in several cases, always fly ash, the hazardous byproduct, is being stabilized and being also disposed of safely, as like the case here in Switzerland. Next slide, please. And also, according to this analysis, a lot of emphasis should be placed on the emissions, the pollution and the air emissions, and a lot of emphasis, and ideally all these regulations should use the European Union Industrial Emissions Directive, which is actually a very, very strict standard. And we do know that if the industries comply with this very strict standard, then there isn't actually any concern in regards to adverse effects of such operations. Next slide, please. So to sum up about the effective governance and the stakeholder engagement, ideally all these projects should provide strong regulations, including fiscal incentives, regular inspections, as well as zero tolerance on corruption, conduct surveys in the very, very beginning of the project up to the design stage, I would say, and map the different priorities and needs of the several stakeholders engaged in the process, develop and tailor-made education and public outreach programs for all the different stakeholders. No discrimination and enhance women empowerment is very, very important to achieve the SDGs. We must ensure the fiscal sustainability of all these projects. There is actually a typical misconception. Stakeholders believe that we don't have money. No, we do have money. We have fiscal institutions. We have philanthropies. We talk about trillions of dollars. However, we must make sure that all these projects enhance the fiscal sustainability, and all these cities that receive all these investments are credit worthy. That is why we must ensure that the replicability and scalability of all those projects, as well as we must enhance the capacity building, knowledge transfer from the private sector to the public sector. And a very prominent tool is actually in order to reduce the risk which is associated with all these high capital investments, is actually the use of result-based financing, like for example, environmental impact bonds to capture this risk of all these investments. Next slide, please. And talking about, innovations or best practices, obviously waste to energy can produce electricity down to a small portion, which is shown also here in these three plants that are actually towards the end in the last columns, noted as useful energy. So the three first bars refer to electricity only plants that indicate an efficiency at about 20%. However, according to the same assessment, this paper also is going to be published by our group. If these plants use the back pressure turbine and the exhaust heat and recover also district heating and cooling, the overall efficiency increases significantly and can go up to about 60 to 65%. Next slide, please. And a very, very interesting example. Next slide, please. And a very interesting example, again, we're going to publish this paper in the next few weeks, is actually what we saw in St. Bart's in the Caribbean, where they have built a waste to energy plant, a small scale plant, to power a desalination plant. And now we talk about waste to water, on this nexus of sustainability, on how to create these interconnections between water, energy, as well as waste. So in that case, in this specific case of sandbars, they are processing waste material to recover a small portion of electricity, and a major part is being recovered to power a desalination plant. So the next slide, please. So that's it actually from my side. I'm happy actually to answer any of your questions or concerns, and this is also my email. And again, thank you very, very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Thanos. I think it's already a lot of elements to cover this conversation. So quite some dimensions to reconcile, actually. If we just recall, so those 5 pillars, environmental resilience, but also economic effectiveness, so clean but affordable. We know that's a constant headache when it comes to the transition. Stakeholder engagement, yes, at all levels. Access equity, but also replicability. So I think those elements will be very interested to discuss with the rest of our panelists afterwards. Talking about environmental resilience and the need also for regulation to enable this environmental resilience. So also top-down. It was mentioned several times in the previous panels that policy needs to help in this regard. So that's why I'm very happy that we have also on the panel Anna Cerdona, which is a senior policy manager for industry and energy system at Bellona Europe, which is a NGO that we all know here. In her work at Bellona, she's been focusing on EU climate and industrial policy, of course, with a particular emphasis on steel, chemicals, and cement. So we're very happy to benefit from your technical expertise, which includes actually industrial decarbonization technologies, Anna. So can you hear us, Anna? Are you here?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, perfect. So Anna, could you tell us from your perspective, how do you see waste to energy fitting in a sustainable management system in sustainable cities, respecting at the same time the waste hierarchy and also, of course, the need to have this sustainable management of waste at local level?
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, thank you so much for having me here and on this panel with very interesting speakers. Yeah, I think when we look at the waste sector, we must look at it from a very systemic perspective. It's a sector that encompasses all different sort of elements, which is why I think climate action in the waste sector needs to be sort of comprehensive and include elements in different parts of the chain to make sure that we're really addressing the systemic causes and impacts of the sector. So I think when it comes to tackling emissions, especially from the sector, there are many elements that need to work together to ensure effective climate action. Some speakers already before had mentioned the waste hierarchy, and I think it's really important to recognize that the waste reduction targets urgently need to be tackled. At the moment, we're not really meeting the trajectory that we first wanted to have until 2030. So it's really important to make sure that we are doing all that we can to actually reduce waste in the first place, because that is, in a way, the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to minimizing the environmental and the climate impact from the waste sector. Another one already that was, of course, mentioned before is high recycling targets that need to complement the reductions in waste creation. So I think the less we manage to reduce the waste, the more recycling we will have to do in order to meet the targets. And I think these two elements together are really important in order to tackle the emissions from the sector. When it comes to a holistic perspective, so of course preventing any waste from happening and making sure that products are designed in a way to have some longevity and be able to be repaired and things like that. So sort of planning that planned obsolescence out of the picture is really important. But then of course we are we have to be realistic when it comes to our residual emissions, and we know that we will have to tackle some residual emissions for some time to come. Hopefully that is a short time, but still technologies such as carbon capture and storage will be needed, but to address emissions that are resulting then from the incineration of such residual waste. Of course, when CCS is implemented, it must not affect other targets, especially in the waste reduction and recycling, because we still need to sort of respect that waste hierarchy and make sure that we're really picking the lowest hanging fruits first. When it comes to the entire picture also, I think it's really important to say that all and each environmental and climate impact actually needs to be accounted for. And there are many sort of options that we're also looking at today. We heard some examples about utilizing the CO2, for example, coming from the waste sector and synthetic fuels. That is a part of the system, perhaps, but we need to also ensure that that CO2 is then also being accounted for when it is emitted. So we need to make sure that greenhouse gas accounting includes a full life cycle. Next slide, please. Yeah, so when it comes to the current emissions of the existing waste incinerators, as I mentioned earlier, reduction and recycling should be prioritized, but we also need to prevent short-term climate effects, and that is a really important thing to do in the short term. So waste incineration hopefully will decrease over time as we improve our waste management systems. But in the meantime, its damaging effects, including greenhouse gas emissions to the atmosphere, really need to be mitigated. And I think the potential inclusion of the sector in the EU ETS is a welcome signal to sort of try to initiate that transition. We've seen that price signals such as the inclusion into the EU ETS have had good effects. In Sweden, for example, where there has been an inclusion. So wherever that has happened, we've seen some positive effects wherever that price has been sort of internalized. That is positive, but we need to make sure that other elements are also there in terms of policy to make sure that that transition happens. So carbon capture and storage, as I mentioned, is one of the technologies that can reduce emissions from the sector. But then we need to develop carbon capture and storage and effective and optimized waste management systems at the same time. And also carbon capture and storage is in a way a license for waste incinerators to operate, and it should be the only way waste incinerators are actually allowed to operate and not put additional greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Next slide, please. So just to sum up, when it comes to cleaning up the waste management system, I think really focusing on reduction and recycling is the key to optimizing it. At the moment, it seems like our municipal waste generation has a trend of growth, at least in Europe as a whole, perhaps not in individual countries, but in Europe as a whole, it seems like to be growing. So according to the EEA, we would need at least 72% of the waste generated to be recycled to meet the Circular Economy Action Plan targets of actually having the amount of residual municipal solid waste by 2030. So we can see how we're going to be in a tough spot if we're not actually focusing on that reduction and that recycling. So we need significantly higher rates of recycling than at present. And alternatively, if not, that target could be achieved by reducing the amount of waste generated by around 1/3 through a combination of these approaches. So that is really some of the key, those are really some of the key elements that need to be there in order to really minimize the environmental and the climate impact. But whatever incineration emissions are left, they need to be tackled. and existing waste incinerators that will operate in the coming decades need to somehow reduce their emissions. I think we've seen really good examples where cities have sort of planned for their carbon neutrality and have included their waste incinerators into their plans. And in those plans, carbon capture and storage should be a requirement for operation, especially in areas where CO2 transport and storage is available, and the waste incinerators can sort of plug into that. So yes, CCS can reduce emissions in waste incinerators that will be operational in the decades to come. And it should be a requirement effectively for their operation. But also it's really important to say that it should also go hand in hand with the other measures that are needed in optimizing the waste management system. So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Anna. And indeed, we're going to have a lot of talks right after on how to make it happen. So we do agree. I think there's joint interest here to say that these 1 billion ton of non-recyclable waste globally are not going to go away from one day to the other. So we do need to implement those solutions. And one part of the discussion afterwards will focus also on those policy drivers which are needed. But before that, let's also take a step back and just have a look at what would be then, in a way, a state-of-the-art plant. There have been already quite some very interesting demonstrations before, but I'm still very happy to welcome here to this conversation Inger Sondergaard, which is Head of Department for Waste to Energy at renewable engineering. And you'd like to tell us a bit more about the Amager plant, which is very special, not only for its sustainability credentials in a way, but also for its organic mingling with the local population and the local city. Inger, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm pleased to participate in this discussion. First of all, maybe short, the Amager project or plant was designed 15 years ago, before we were talking about carbon capture for energy from waste plant. They had the space for a plant and have also got the permit for building a full-scale carbon capture plant, and have been for a couple of years operating a pilot plant. But I'm not going to talk about carbon capture in this, but about the Amager project, which is a true plant for the citizen. Yeah, please, next slide. Our cities are expanding, and so is Copenhagen. We can see that both residential and also recreative areas, that they move into industrial areas. And especially if these industrial areas are close to the water in old harbor areas like we have here. In the yellow circle, you can see the Amager waste to energy facility. It was built just beside the old facility, and it has a number of neighbors. To the left, which is west, you have a large residential areas with a number of flats, and it's not cheap flats, they're quite expensive. On the north side, you have a large harbor for sailing boat. On the south, it's a bit difficult to see, but there's a number of sport facilities like wakeboard, go-kart, and so on. There's also, as you can see, a number of restaurants, these small orange dots with a fork and the knife. Many of them are built after the Amager plant was established, but there were several when we built the plant. Among others, there's a 3-star Michelin restaurant, Noma, and they grow their own vegetables in the garden just beside the plant. And of course, with this location, there needs to be done something special to build a new waste to energy facility in that area. Yeah, you can shift to the next. And that's why the managing director at that time created a vision, which is quoted here. And that was that we want to show the world that it's possible to produce energy in the middle of the city from waste, and also that a waste to energy facility can also be a gift to this city. So they had high ambitions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. When starting a new waste to energy project, it's very important that you know who are your stakeholders and you understand them. This slide shows the 4 large stakeholder groups or key groups. First, you have the waste sector, who's responsible for delivering the waste to the facility. We have the energy sector, who takes the electricity produced, the district heating. On top, we of course have the authorities, which is a very important stakeholder, both with the local government, but also with all the authorities you have to collaborate with for the planning, environmental permit. There's also health authorities, traffic, and so on. And on the right side, on the top, at last but not at least, also the community. That's very important. Both the neighbors, also all the different kind of community groups, and all the NGOs taking care of the environment, the nature, wildlife, and so on. It's very important to reach out, to have a dialogue and understand what are the different perceptions of the new plant and how can we collaborate together. On the bottom, I put a new coming dark blue circle, and that's the CO2 sector, because in the future, it's clear that waste to energy facilities, or most, at least the large one, will have carbon capture. And when designing a new project, this sector will also become an important stakeholder. From the initial dialogue with the stakeholders regarding the Amager Brücke plant, it was clear that we need to design a plant which has a significant high energy efficiency and significant high environmental performance. And it was not about a discussion about CO2 at that stage. It was a discussion about all the other emissions from a plant, so low emissions. And of course, it was also a request that we need access from the public to the plant. It should be the gift to the city as the ambition from the managing director. New slide, please. And to create this gift, architect competitions was launched, and out of this came this idea of having ski slopes on top of a new hill, or maybe the first hill in the Copenhagen area. And it's not only about skiing, it's also about climbing, hiking, training, running, or a lot of activities. And in that way, it become a landmark for the city, which both attract all the local citizens, where they can do sport and bring guests and have a great view of Copenhagen. But it definitely also attract a number of international guests, where they can come learn about waste cycling, energy recovery, and how we do it in Denmark. Next slide. Thank you. And architecture, that's of course interesting, but if you are a waste to energy engineer, you think that the process design is the most interesting and the most important of a plant like this. So in parallel with the architect competition and all the design of the nice dress around the plant, our team was working very hard on the environmental performance and also energy performance. How could we get most out of this plant, and how could we get the lowest possible emissions? And all these different alternatives and optimizations, they were investigated both from a financial point of view, but also from a life cycle analysis approach. What is important when you build a plant like the Amager Brücke project, which really has a very high performance, is that you cannot just take this and move it to another place in the world, because the framework conditions are very important. Here we had the advantage of a public client that had a long-term perspective, 20 years. So the payback time of optimizations could be 15, maybe up to 20 years, and not 5 years, which we sometimes see with private clients. Besides, there in Copenhagen is a very large district heating network that could swallow all the additional heat that we could recover from the plant. And finally, it was possible also to discharge both clean wastewater, but also clean condensate. And that makes it possible to create a waste flue gas cleaning system with flue gas condensation, which really give high energy recovery and very low emissions. Next slide, please. This is the outcome. This is the energy balance for the plant from 2018 from ARC. About 450 tons of waste went into the plant. And as you can see, with a very high energy efficiency, it created electricity for 30,000 households and district heating for more than 70,000 households. Next slide, please. And it's not only about recovery of energy, it's also about recovery of material. And as mentioned several times today, it's about recovering metal, different kind of metal that can be recycled directly. It's also possible in Denmark to recover the minerals and use it for road constructions from the bottom ash. Then at the bottom, you can see actually clean water. If you have flue gas condensation and you cool down the flue gas to about 30 degrees, you will get a huge amount of water. Today, the water is used for makeup water for the boiler. It could potentially also be used as makeup water for this large district heating system. And with all the new energy transition, the water could also be used for production of green hydrogen, where a lot of water is needed, and some places it's not easy to get access to water. So there's an advantage here with the water. Besides what all have been, if we can go one back again. Besides, maybe I could mention something which haven't been mentioned today, is that when you have a wet flue gas cleaning system, you are able actually to produce gypsum from some of the residuals. And actually in Denmark now, 2 of the plants, they are selling or getting rid of this gypsum to go into production of new gypsum elements for building constructions. So, and there's actually a request for getting recycled gypsum. So maybe that's a new thing. And on the other hand, we have the carbon capture, and we have a potential of 500,000 tons of waste, and we have carbon capture from the Amager project, and we have talked about that and the possibilities in that. So I'll just jump to the next and final slide. And a very important slide is or achievement for the local people in the municipality of Copenhagen. That's the emissions to the air. And the red line is the Industrial Emission Directive, which is then 100%. And what you can see in green is the permit. And the blue is the monthly average of the different components, and the gray one is the spot measurements. And what you can see here, we are significantly below what was in the permit, and even further below what's in the industrial emission limits or directive. So all in all, I think we managed to achieve very low emissions, which is definitely valuable for the citizens of Copenhagen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Inger. That's very impressive, actually a very impressive project already. And even more when you say that the whole genesis started actually 15 years ago. So as the topic of the discussion today is very much directed towards the citizens, I'd like to start with you and with the first question on the genesis of the project. So you showed before this consultation of various stakeholders. How did it happen concretely? How long did it take? And was it easy at the end? Did you get this onboarding of the local population from the start?
Yes, maybe the local citizens were the easiest one. So, of course, a lot of this stakeholder management and interaction that was done by ARC, who was the client, by their managing director, their communication manager, and their team. But maybe first I should mention that in Denmark, waste to energy is in general very accepted, and waste to energy facilities have been inside cities for many years. So it's not there. It's not from the citizens where you meet the resistance. But it took a couple of years. I think they started very early, the client, and there was a lot of meetings. You need to do a lot of meetings as part of this planning and permitting process. But ARC also did a lot of additional meetings with the different citizens, NGOs, politicians, where they were informing and discussing about the project. And you can never underestimate how much time and hours it's necessary, but it's definitely very important. And yeah, it's difficult for me to say if it took 2 years or more. It was a process which continued throughout the entire project.
All right, thank you. Just to a very quick answer then, if it didn't come from the citizens, where did the resistance come from?
It was mainly some of the NGOs for the environment.
All right, and how did you overcome that in the end? So I suppose I mean, was the project then co-developed with those local organizations? How did you provide the safeguards for the project to get the green light in the end?
There was a very close dialogue with the NGOs, but definitely also with the authorities, the environmental APA, discussing the emissions, and a part of this was also to lower. That's also why the permit has significant lower values than in the industrial emission directory. And it was something that we discussed. If you want to place a plant in the city, then we also need to be ambitious and promise and do go for a design with low emissions. But I think one thing which is maybe important to mention is that when you have a waste to energy facility in the city, then NOx reduction is important. And as the only plant actually in Denmark, the Amagerbakke project have a selective SCR for reduction of NOx. So we go to very low limits. I think the guarantee value is around 15 milligram per normal cubic meter. So,
thank you, Inga. Moving to another aspect which was heavily mentioned today, actually, which is the use of CCS. So, Anna, you mentioned in your presentation that if we really want to cope with the climate ambitions, we need to make sure that all existing and or future plants will have CCS. From your perspective, and maybe one question, I don't know if you can answer it, but do you know how much adoption we have of the CCS technology today in the existing facilities that we have? How much are those technologies being adopted by the technology, Anna or Thanos maybe? And I have another question which relates then to the policy levers. What do you see as the best way to have then those carbon capture facilities developed? Because I think we do have a paradox here between saying on the one hand that those infrastructure will not last long because then we will be waste free, but on the other hand asking for a very capex intensive investment, which then may not have the time to get profit back in a way, which is also the logic for the citizens and the city not to lose their money in a way. So yeah, how do we reconcile this paradox? Maybe just the first question about the level of adoption. How adopted are CCS technologies today in the waste to energy? I don't know if Thanos or Anna, you have an answer to that, or even Inga?
Yeah, if they don't have, I might have an answer. I don't know if it's the complete truth.
Let's see. Anyone?
Yeah.
Yes, so Inga, if you want to actually go ahead, I
Yeah.
can contribute later. It's really up to you.
All right.
Yeah. The AVR plant in Holland has a plant that has been in operation for several years. At least that's the one. That's always the key plant that is mentioned as an example. And then of course in Norway they have started in Oslo to build a plant, and several places the same. But
Okay, so it's happening. That's at least good news to hear. Thanos, you wanted to comment?
Of course, yes. So we have this tendency, I mean, recently to talk about bioenergy, carbon capture and storage systems. And we keep actually forgetting a very, very important part. I mean, it was actually extensively mentioned today in all these discussions, this life cycle thinking. I mean, a recent study that was published by Stanford University, where they put together all the impacts, the different impacts that we do have from the extraction of the raw materials to the development of the carbon capture systems and the end of life issues that we do have. They claim that, I mean, apparently we can save down to 15%, 15%. Assuming that all the systems are 100% efficient. So first part of our equations, as we talk about insignificant savings plus significant investments, as well as we have this tendency to discuss only about carbon and how to decarbonize our economies, like we say, bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, and we keep forgetting about other indirect impacts that we may have and other pollutants that may be emitted from all these operations. For example, biomass is actually, you can actually emit particulate matter down to like a nano level, which obviously can impose a huge threat on the environment. So that's why when we discuss all this, I mean, regulations, developments, and level of adoption, it's actually very good for us to put together all this life cycle and holistic approach in our effort to understand the possible adverse as well as future effects of our actions. Namely, as I said, like not only carbon, but also material use, energy intensity of processes, and several others. In terms of deployment, because you asked, following also your question, Iman and the rest, I mean, at the moment we have in Europe some developments, as it was mentioned also earlier, in Norway, France. In the US, regretfully, we haven't seen a very strong movement as yet.
Thank you, Thanos. So very fair point, actually, about not to focus only on CO2, because I think that's one aspect which is very interesting in the project that Inga just presented. Can you tell us more about this water treatment and the mechanism that is in place around flue gas condensation, how it is actually, it's not CCS, but it's actually contributing quite greatly to the environmental performance of the plant. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, it's a wet flue gas cleaning system where you are scrubbing the water. First of all, there's an ESP, which is taking out all the particles with all the heavy metals. Then we have the SCR, which is reducing the NOx. And finally, we have the wet flue gas cleaning with a number of big towers where you can wash the flue gas, and then in that way get constantly very low emissions. But the flue gas condensation, that's the last step where you take the flue gas and cool it down to 30 degrees and you get a lot of water out of it. And of course, you can only do that if you have the possibility to discharge water somewhere, and this water is salt, so it can't go into a river. It needs to be close to the sea, but you can also recover the water and reuse it if you clean it sufficiently. But that has, for example, to go into green hydrogen. But it's used on, it's a good idea on very large plants, because then it's a good business case, and with the wet system it produces less hazardous waste or residuals that you have to store afterwards, and it also uses less chemicals. So, but it is a widely used system, but it cannot be used all places. You need to look at the framework conditions, and it's also a question about money. It's larger in investment, so you need to be able to look over a longer planning period.
Yeah. Thank you, Inger. That's another paradox from the 5 points that Thanos brought that we could solve maybe later in the conversation. I know we don't have much time left still, but you know, this paradox between replicability and the inherent local nature of each project. All of them have been presented. They're so amazing, all of them, but they're also super particular. So how do we scale up all those wonderful things, taking into account the local context, of course? But before that, coming back to you, Anna, on the policy levers. So you have a very committed industry, but there is, on the one hand, those very important investments to be made, this uncertainty on the long run in terms of the waste volumes, in terms of the regulatory framework that will apply. How do we best drive the sustainable transition of waste to energy plant from a regulatory policy perspective?
Yeah, I think we mentioned a couple of perspectives already. We mentioned the potential inclusion of the sector into the EU ETS, which I think, you know, having a CO2 price and sort of full counting of the climate impact of waste incineration is a good signal to the industry itself. But apart from the price signal, that is important, but it's not the only element that will be needed to sort of shift the waste sector. I think enabling policies are also needed to make sure that this transition actually happens. So not only price signals, we've seen sort of policy come out, such as the Net Zero Industry Act, where we have a CO2 storage obligation, which sort of gives a bit of certainty when it comes to ensuring that there will be actual availability of CO2 storage there for industries such as waste incinerators. And in general, sort of making sure that there is a very clear plan for how to deliver the infrastructure needed, whether that is CO2 transport and storage or waste management systems and recycling systems and similar things. That is really, really important. So having not only a price framework, but also an enabling framework that delivers the infrastructure needed is really important. Also, when it comes to specifically CO2 transport and storage, sort of making sure that there are clear policy frameworks around these assets is also really needed to ensure that sectors such as waste incineration have open access to those networks. And we also need to make sure that there is support for the individual projects. So if a waste incinerator wants to do capture, then getting the cities involved, making sure that there is proper planning of infrastructure, that the investments are planned, that the timelines are sort of all coordinated with each other is really important. And we've seen that is really important on the local level, also in examples such as Clemetsrud in Oslo. So I think all of these aspects are really important to make sure that the projects get off the ground and make sure that we actually start storing the CO2 that is coming out of the waste incinerators.
Thank you. Any reaction from the panel on that, on the policy drivers and the elements that Anna just mentioned?
Not a reaction, but maybe a further comment.
Yeah.
I think I hope that somebody will look at the taxonomy, because here waste to energy is not on the positive list, and I think that's actually a shame or a hinder for the further development, also including the carbon capture, and also for financing waste to energy facilities in countries in Europe where they only have landfill or would like to also develop that part. So I hope that that's something that could be revised. I know it's a living document.
Yeah. The taxonomy. Indeed. Probably in the future it could evolve. I mean, I think it's true. We could also factor in those additional elements, which are the development of CCS or other type of sustainability technologies that may come. Coming back maybe simply to the policy framework, Thanos, you have you're talking to us from further away, actually on the other part of the planet. You've probably seen different models for that. Do you have in your mind some best practices that could be developed at European level?
I think actually more or less, Imani, what we have discussed today about the use of carbon capture storage, about using, different types of feedstocks in our effort to decarbonize this industry, actually is very, very important. Also, from my view, it's actually a lot of emphasis should be placed on methane. About over a couple of years ago, the US government, along with the European Commission, initiated this global methane pledge, placing a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on this specific pollutant. And apparently, even after a couple of years, neither in the US nor at the European level, we have seen some very strong regulations focusing on this specific pollutant. And obviously, if we design regulations for methane, obviously waste to energy and all the other technologies for waste management will have a clear advantage over the least desirable solution, which is the landfilling of the materials.
Thank you, Thanos. So maybe to take again a slightly broader view on the risk and in general the facilitating framework. So considering that we have a regulation that is ambitious, and I think this is really something we've seen happening over the past years, and this ambition will increase and requirements on sustainability will increase. We have a committed industry. What are in a way the success factors for such project to take off the ground? Because we know that obligations are one thing, but getting those things done on the field is totally different. Inger, you mentioned a bit this aspect that there was various factors. What is that? Is it district heating and cooling around? Is it about also the ownership of such plant? Is it better if it's a city, if it's private owned? From your perspective, what are the other elements of the recipe for success here?
Yeah, it's difficult to answer the question about if it's private or municipal owned. It could rather be both, and it also depends on in which area of Europe you might be or in the world. But I think to get a good business case for the plant, definitely district heating is a facilitator, because then you get a large income. It's 2/3 of the energy which can come from for the district heating compared to if you only have electricity. So from that point of view, that's definitely a very good framework conditions to have a lot of an opportunity to sell a lot of heat. It's also about having the security of the waste, because if you don't know, if you have short-term waste contract and you don't know how your waste landscape look in 1 or 2 years or 5 years, then it's difficult to do a long time planning and do these optimization, which costs something initially because it's more expensive, but then you gain later because you either have lower cost because you have lower consumables or lower residuals, or you have higher income on the energy. So having this, being able to get this long-term perspective, the security of the waste, the possibility to produce, especially district heating, everybody can produce electricity, and also to have consistent and firm legislation, so it doesn't change all the time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Inger. We've already covered quite a lot of topics. Now I'm just looking into the room if there is any burning question from the audience. Yes, I have one. Patrick.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Clarence, and I'm working in ESWET, so I want to state this. When I'm looking at the day or the afternoon, I'm asking myself, why on one side do we see success stories of waste to energy plants in cities, explaining us how much energy is generated, how much materials recovered, how much CO2 is saved. Then we see the view on what can be done with the plants in Denmark or others who start to use CCS and so on. And then we hear also presentation which say that finally we don't need to hamper recycling. So we shouldn't use waste to energy, or maybe cautiously use it. We have some companies talking, or some associations talking about MRBT. So basically shaking the waste and landfilling everything you don't get out. And for me, it's a complex discussion. I don't understand. We heard a lot of numbers, a lot of added values. But for me, I see there's a mismatch between, on one side, how good the technology is, which showed it, and a fear that maybe can hamper something which later on will be needed. How is this compatible to say, listen, don't do it today, don't use waste to energy, because later we will hamper waste to recycling? It's a question. Why are we not in the taxonomy clearly looking objectively at waste to energy? We looked at it, or what's happening. Why is it not happening? Why are we not looking at it? Why are we talking in a dogmatic way? Waste is difficult to treat. Waste must be 100% recycled. If it can be or cannot be, it's not important. We must recycle it. And everyone who could potentially hamper recycling should not be looked at, cannot be in the taxonomy. There's a potential threat somewhere as soon as we get to zero waste, meaning we can recycle everything for always. So this is the question I would have to the audience here and also to the one online. How can we balance these two? On one side, we have superb technology, very efficient, no emissions. We saw all the advantages. And we have the fear that we will hamper recycling, so we shouldn't maybe not use it. How do you balance this both? How has it been done with the speakers in these cities? What's the way forward? That's my question.
I think that's a perfect closing question, actually, Patrick, because we're running out of time. So maybe right before we have the closing remarks, I would ask our panelists to give a really super short answer to that. But how do we crack the nut, basically? How do we get more flagship projects like those that we have seen in the cities? If you had one element to bring, what would it be? Super shortly, please, and then we will close. So Thanos, you start.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, we must realize that zero waste is an excellent goal to strive toward. However, it is also against our nature as well as our technological capacity. That being said, we will always talk about a fraction that wouldn't have actually a value in the market, like a commodity, a recyclable, and in that case, we'll have to recover a value out of it. To give you an example, diapers. You should know, like in New York City, about 4 to 5% of the waste stream is diapers. It's actually a plastic material that doesn't have obviously a value in the market. On the other hand, it has actually a very good calorific value. So that being said, on the design stage, we must actually make sure that we have an excellent understanding of all these concepts, as well as on all these different types of materials, as well as their value in the market. So to sum up, I mean, from my view and my experience, in order to enhance the circularity or the recyclability or the sustainable waste management in a community, ideally and ultimately we need three major factors. The very first one is actually the public entities or the municipalities to provide the proper collection, infrastructure, and education. The second is the market to make profit out of all these materials. And the third is actually stakeholder engagement / citizens participation.
All right, thank you, Thanos. So we will remain there. We just need to get better. Thank you. Very quickly, Anna.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a difficult question, of course, in every area at the moment in climate and environment, we're tackling with different scenarios that we can choose. So that's always a question. I think it will need to be a systemic approach that tackles multiple issues at the same time. I mean, the incineration industry today cannot belong in the taxonomy because it pollutes today. So not every plant is like Amagarbake, not every plant is planning to do CCS, and that's something we need to recognize and we need to deal with. So I think a parallel development and a focus on the waste hierarchy, a focus on all of the targets that we currently have in Europe on waste reduction, on waste recycling, all of these parallel developments are actually a good way forward. And yes, I hope that the existing waste incineration emissions will be tackled, and we can work towards that by creating policies that first recognize the CO2 emissions that are actually coming out of the plants, and then also create the enabling conditions to make sure that technologies like CCS happen. So in a way, a parallel development of both of those elements needs to be present to tackle the problem.
All right. Thank you, Anna. Inge, your last short words.
Yeah, it's not an easy question, and it's very political. And for the taxonomy, we have natural gas. That's in the taxonomy. But yeah, I think we need to collaborate locally within the different authorities and also through EU to meet the targets on recycling and then try to do find a good and sustainable solution for the rest of the residual waste. But it's difficult to point at one single item that we could do. But collaboration and getting an understanding across the different sectors.
Collaboration and a better taxonomy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you to all of you. Maybe before handing over to Sigrid for the closing remarks, I would ask everyone to thank you all and to give you a round of applause, because it was a very, very nice conversation. Of course, we're not done, and yet, Sigrid, you have the difficult task.
Well, thank you very much, Aurélie. Well, we had already one closing speech, but I can't spare you mine. I want to thank you all for participating today in this event, and with all the contributors from across the EU, from various backgrounds. And we have heard how waste-to-energy technologies can help to generate value for regions and local communities. And of course, not everybody shares the same opinion about it. And I'm sure we will continue the debate and the discussion over the months and years to come. And I hope also that this will not be the last event of this kind in this location. Throughout the event, we have emphasized the importance of balancing environmental sustainability, economic development, and social well-being. We have heard how waste-to-energy initiatives can contribute to a circular economy, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and create economic opportunities for local communities. We also heard about the importance of stakeholder engagement, transparency, and accountability in ensuring that these initiatives are effective, sustainable, and responsive to the need of citizens. I also want to emphasize the importance of taking a long-term perspective when it comes to waste management and waste to energy. The challenges we face today are complex and interconnected, and they require us to think beyond short-term solutions. We need to invest in sustainable infrastructure, innovation, and education, and we need to be willing to make difficult choices in order to achieve our goals. And we just heard how difficult it can become. But we work together, and if we work together and remain committed to the principles of sustainability, equity, and justice, I'm confident that we can create a better future for ourselves and for generations to come. In addition, I want to stress the importance of continued dialogue and collaboration between policymakers, experts, and citizens like today. We have seen how valuable it is to bring diverse perspectives and experiences to the table, and how this can lead to innovative and effective solutions. Therefore, I urge you all to continue engaging in constructive dialogue and to remain open to different viewpoints and ideas. Only by working together can we find the most effective ways to manage our waste and to generate energy in a sustainable and equitable manner. As we conclude this event, I want to stress the importance of taking this message and recommendations from this event and turning them into action. It is important that these messages and conclusions reach as many EU policymakers and stakeholders as possible. By sharing the insights from the event, we can help to inform and influence policy decisions related to waste management, circular economy, and energy security at the EU level. We need to work together across sectors and disciplines and at all levels of EU policymaking, from local authorities to national governments and EU legislators, to implement sustainable waste to energy solutions that benefit our communities and our environment. I encourage all of us to continue the conversations and collaborations that have started here today, and to bring these discussions back to our respective communities and organizations. By working together, we can create a more sustainable, circular, and resilient Europe that generates value for all its citizens. Finally, I want to express my gratitude to the Committee of the Regions for hosting us in this beautiful place today, to all the panelists whose input on the topics discussed today is priceless, to all of the organizers and the volunteers who made this event possible, and to all the participants both here in this room and online for following the debate so closely. Your hard work, dedication, and commitment to sustainability have helped to make this event a success, and I'm sure that it will have a positive impact on the ongoing conversations and actions related to waste management and waste to energy. Let us continue to build on this momentum and to create a brighter future for all. Thanks again for your participation, and I look forward to continuing this important work with you all. And for the guests here, please join us for a cocktail reception. Thank you very much.